Welcome to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid. A set of conversations about our government, our politics, and the kind of country we aspire to be. And now, here's your host, Edwin Eisendrath, on WCPT 820, Chicago's Progressive Talk.
Hello, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day to you all. And to all of us who love our country. You know, this week, what a week. Wow, what a week. And I want to talk about the week, but I think I need to put it in some context because as terrible as it was, it follows a pattern. I mean, the serial lawbreaker in the White House doubled down again. You know, last week a judge blocked him from cutting health care grants to my state, Illinois, but also to Minnesota, Colorado, and California. And so this week he cut environmental grants to those same states, right? He couldn't get away with health care cuts, so he did environmental cuts. Look, people in blue states pay taxes. We vote in elections. We serve in the military. Combined, the GDP of just those four states that Trump was targeting is $8.5 trillion. That's nearly a third, well, 30%, almost a third, of the nation's total GDP. But Donald Trump, you know, to him, we're just agitators to put down. So it's no surprise that his ICE actions began in LA, moved to Chicago, then on to Minneapolis. Look, the Constitution does not say citizenship belongs only to those who voted for Donald Trump, right? And the federal treasury is not his personal piggy bank. That's clear in the Constitution. That's what judges keep ruling. But Trump continues to ignore the law, and the rest of us continue to take him to court. But look, taking this criminal administration to court, as important as that is, only goes so far. After all, we know now that Trump violated at least 97 court orders in January alone. We know that just since October, judges have ruled more than 4,400 times that he's illegally detaining immigrants. I mean, really, there are plenty of legal ways to detain lawbreakers in America. Plenty of them. Trump doesn't care, and so our courts are bogged down in 20,000 habeas suits. Look, Donald Trump is, this is his character, right? He was found guilty by different juries of ordinary Americans of, let's see, sexual assault, defamation, and fraud. And according to Jack Smith in his testimony, the evidence is there to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he incited and led the January 6th insurrection, and he willfully misled the government to cover up the stealing of classified documents. That's Donald Trump. But Republicans, the former party of law and order, the party of a strong foreign policy with respect to dictators like Putin, the party of states' rights and individual liberty, they've given all that up to wrap their arms around this terrible, terrible man. And now, as they try to defend the indefensible, as we heard from Pam Bondi, their words would make a Soviet propagandist blush. Oh my God, it didn't have to be this way. I mean, look, Republicans considered leaving Trump way back when he said he could grab women by their pussies. Remember that? It's even hard for me to say, but he said it, and they didn't leave him. They could have easily parted from Trump when he shook down Ukraine for dirt on Joe Biden. For a moment, they said they would leave him on January 6th. But they crawled back. The doctors among them should have walked away when his policies made measles great again. The parents among them should have parted company over Jeffrey Epstein. The lovers of liberty in that bunch had the chance to flee when he sent his armed thugs into the streets of American cities. And in every case, Republican leaders, Republican office holders, Republicans chose Donald Trump over us. It didn't have to be this way. It shouldn't have been this way. I mean, Americans, no matter what their party, they seem to have seen the light. You know, his poll numbers are cracking. I mean, when we hear Pam Bondi and Carolyn Levitt say the volume of litigation against Trump is a sign of a corrupt judiciary, but our eyes see the volume of litigation as a sign of rampant lawlessness of the regime, we aren't confused. Americans remain on the side of the rule of law. Look, now the whole GOP is going to face America's reckoning because they're crashing in the polls. They're getting washed out in every special election, and midterms are coming. So they're panicking. And I'm sure you know this. We've talked about this. They never thought it would happen. After all, we're a giant nation with a short attention span, and Trump loyalists, they don't just own Fox. They own the great majority of our local TV channels. They own most of the newspaper chains. They control the algorithms that determine what gets promoted on social media. Surely they thought Americans wouldn't have the focus to see beyond the headlines, their headlines. Yeah, well, not only did we see, we acted. We showed up. We protested. We went out and protected each other. We called out corporate enablers and complicit law firms. We reached out across the usual racial and religious lines in our cities to stand up and say we're not going to be pushed around anymore. The other side, hugging Trump rather than holding to American values, has left the GOP in a place that Americans don't recognize, and don't like. Like right on Valentine's Day, we love our country. They love Donald Trump. Which brings me back to this week, right? This week, Trump sold out the planet for a pocket full of petrodollars. I mean, he declared science was wrong and he ended the government's efforts to fight climate change, just like that. He ordered the military to buy power from coal plants. No one wants to go back to the days of smog-filled Los Angeles in the 1970s. No one wants to see the polar ice caps disappear. No one wants oceans to rise, storms to increase, lung disease to grow everywhere, food supplies to be jeopardized. I'm wrong. Almost no one. A year ago, Donald Trump told fossil fuel execs that for $1 billion contribution, he'd rig the system for them. So my gosh, this terrible presidential decision isn't just bad policy, guys. It's a reminder that he's totally corrupt. And this week, Trump's Attorney General Pam Bondi went to the hearing on Capitol Hill and insulted both Jeffrey Epstein's victims and the very idea of congressional oversight. Did you see it? That petulant and insulting performance where she made clear that the administration views Congress as the president's chorus line, and anyone not high kicking on cue will be surveilled and investigated by the executive branch. Geez, this week they declared their operation in Minneapolis a success. No, it wasn't. That operation left 2 Americans dead. And as it happened in Illinois, administration lawyers in Minnesota, just like they had to do here in Illinois, they were quietly in court dropping the charges that they had publicly made. And most recently against someone named Julio Sosa Celis. He was a man who they claimed was trying to kill one of their agents. But under oath, they cited new facts rather than old lies. But those new facts were videos proving that they were engaged in old lies. And back on Capitol Hill, Republicans were still parroting those lies. Americans don't see the armed assault on our cities as a success. We don't like kidnapping children to entrap their parents. We don't accept that mass thugs can show up with government armor and shoot protesters. And Republicans who stuck with them, they're left with no branch to lean on except the one where they call ordinary Americans agitators and domestic terrorists. I'm calling BS on that because the rest of us know those ordinary Americans. They are us, and they're heroes. And this week, because this week was a big one, the head of the antitrust division in the DOJ was pushed out. That paves the way for the administration to okay a bunch of anti-competitive and illegal mergers that'll further raise prices on consumers. By the way, also allow even more media consolidation. The Chicago Sun-Times has been tracking, the prices on 35 common grocery items for a year. This week, they reported those prices have climbed by double digits. Ending antitrust enforcement, that won't help any of us buying groceries, but it's a sop to the Davos crowd, the Epstein elites. But it's too late. It's too late. Americans have caught on. It's not their world anymore. After all, this week, we only caught on because this terrible week was just another week, like all of Trump's weeks. I mean, weeks where the president invaded Latin America to steal its oil that we now sell for cash that's kept in a Qatari bank controlled by Donald Trump. A Qatari bank, please. We used our army to put that money in his pocket. Weeks where we threatened to invade Greenland, forcing all of Europe to open a Western front, and taking pressure off Vladimir Putin's invasion in Ukraine in the East. That's what Trump did. Weeks after Trump said he's personally going to take $10 billion out of our treasury. Weeks where the price of food went up and the president told us affordability, like climate change, like his collusion with Russia, like everything else is hoax, hoax, hoax. Yeah. Republicans followed Donald Trump to a place of unbridled greed, corruption, and contempt. Contempt. They followed him to a place of dark coercion and grift. They followed him as he tried to destroy this nation and grab everything for himself. And now there's no place for them to hide. Enter the SAVE Act. They won't pass the SAVE Act, but they're going to try. They're going to try it because it will undermine voting in the next election. But you know what? Doesn't matter. Their time is nearly over. Retribution is coming in the form it comes best, the power of the American people. Into that dark, dark little corner that is where the Republican Party has brought America, now comes a massive spirit. You can see it. You can feel it. When you talk to people, you know it's coming. It's a generous and optimistic spirit. It's the spirit of Alex Preddy and Renee Good. It's the spirit of a nation conceived in liberty and dedicated to human equality. And you know what? It's time to get the brooms and start sweeping. Got a great show for you. We'll be back with the fabulous Dave Roberts in just a minute.
You're listening to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody. Dave Roberts is back. He is, of course, the prolific explainer of the intersection of politics, policy, and climate. Please, please find his work on social media and on Substack. Find it and be part of that community, the Volts community. It is just really good, and it stays really good, like week in and week out. I've learned a ton from him. Dave, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Edwin.
Okay, so a week ago, you had a podcast on how climate is doing. And it began with, Dr. Sarah Kapnick telling us that rising temperatures are real, that they're being measured by instruments, across the planet and in satellites. And oh, gee whiz, that rapid rise in climate is caused by fossil fuel emissions. Enter Donald Trump. Right? This week, the president of the United States ended the fight against climate change, ordered the military to buy coal-powered electricity. I'm guessing you have some thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any particularly brilliant thoughts. What do you say? It's absurd. I mean, the reason I did a check-in on the science is like no scientist is questioning the things that Donald Trump is questioning. We're all past that. It's more interesting things in the science now, like the role of tipping points and all that kind of stuff. But I think everybody at this point has just sort of taken the U.S. off the board in their minds in this capacity, in this fight, and are just thinking about how to do it without us now. It's grim.
It's very grim, but I actually don't know if I want to talk about whether we get away with it or not in a minute. But before we get there, I watched some of strike that. I went and looked at Fox to see what they said about it. And they're saying things like, I hope Donald Trump gets the credit he deserves for this. People aren't paying enough attention to this. Finally, I agree with them. People aren't paying enough attention to it. But they said, this is just so great because cars will cost less and they haven't. Is it possible that after all this time, they don't understand anything about climate change?
It's funny. I've bumped up against this many times in my career, Edwin. You won't be surprised, and it still amazes me. But like I was watching, for instance, a Fox segment the other day with Larry Kudlow. I don't know if you know who Larry Kudlow is.
I think I might have seen the same one.
He's one of these guys who's been on Fox for decades now. Who knows? Who knows why? Who knows what he originally did or whatever skill or knowledge he ever originally had? He's basically just a talking head. But he's been hosting a news show for literally decades and has done, I think, probably over those decades, probably dozens of segments that in one way or another touch on climate change. And he was talking about this on Fox, and he was talking about it in such a way that it made it very clear that he doesn't understand what it is, like at the very root of it. Like he doesn't understand the distinction between local particulate air pollution that damages your lungs when you breathe it, and greenhouse gas emissions that are increasing the sort of radiative, power of the atmosphere, which is a whole separate thing. That is just core. You know what I mean? Like that's just what climate change is. The guy has been talking about it for decades, are like crapping on it, trying to, I guess, refute it, and he's just never bothered to do what would be 5 minutes of work, literally just reading the Wikipedia page on climate change. He hasn't even done that. And that's what gets me. That's what strikes me over and over again. Even if you view it as something of the enemy, even as you view it as something you need to fight against, even then, it seems like you would have just the curiosity, the human curiosity, to at least figure out what it is that you're saying is not happening. But they just don't care. I mean, that's it. That's it. He just doesn't care enough about this to even figure out what it is on like a high school, chemistry class level. And I don't know what to do about that. I don't know what to say to people like that. I don't know how they tick or why, but I think that is very reflective of the viewers of Fox. Like, this has been around for decades now. I mean, there are explainers about climate change thick on the ground. You can't throw a dead cat without hitting one on the internet. If you want the facts on this, they are everywhere. Easy to find. You barely have to lift a finger. They don't care to even know, to even learn what it is that they're saying is not happening.
Well, so I wonder if the part where you said it's been around for decades is working against us, because we have said this change in climate could cause enormous damage. Damage that'll affect humans, right? Damage to the food chain, damage to
is affecting humans,
right? But humans are also very adaptable, and we're getting around it. We're going to the movies. People are going out for Valentine's Day. You know what? They're kind of concerned about the troops in their streets, and the climate isn't really bothering most people every day. And I feel like this is sort of this excuse they're using is, oh, they told us it would be terrible. And look, there are more people on the planet than ever. We seem to be doing fine. I feel like I'm hearing Ruth Bader Ginsburg say, you guys are saying it's okay because you're standing an umbrella and it's dry, and now you're saying you don't need the umbrella.
Well, I don't even think that's quite right. They're not really under an umbrella. There are weather disasters happening in the United States that are hurting real people. Real people are getting displaced and hurt and killed. But these people don't care if a mother in a minivan gets shot in the face right in front of them. Why would they care about a poor person far away that they don't even know? These people just don't care. So it's not that they're okay. And that's the thing is like, I think we've discussed this before. Like a long time, I think a lot of people in the climate world had this idea that like if things got bad enough, obvious enough, that there would be some revelation, some sort of like eye-opening, like, I see, we've been wrong about this, you're right. But these people are not going to care. They're not going to care tomorrow. They're not going to care 10 years from now. Things can be falling around their ears and they will be thinking, how can I get mine? Do you know what I mean? Like you can't
there was a
force
revelation.
people to, you can't force people to care.
There was a revelation, I think. They decided that it isn't worth saving humanity, that they need their private islands, they need their private power, and the rest of it, and the idea that we're all in it together is too dangerous for them. That was their revelation.
Yeah, they don't want to live in a common rule-based society in which we all defer to one another, obey rules in the name of getting along with one another, in the name of mutual flourishing. They just don't like that. They don't like society. In climate, if you think about it, like it's hard to talk these people into sacrificing, even in the short term, for obvious benefits that are manifest to them in their community. If you think about climate, it's just that ask on a much larger, much more abstract level, like sacrifice for people 10 years from now, maybe across the world. Like these people, you know, so like this is what governments are for. People have lives, they're busy, they don't necessarily have time in their day-to-day lives to think about 20 years from now, 30 years from now, whatever. This is literally what government is for. And what the right is trying to do is make government as reactive, minute to minute, as unable to plan, as unable to move in a coordinated fashion. You know, they want that long term, they want that short term. So everything about climate, sacrificing for the long term, allowing an international rule-based order to govern your actions, all of it they hate. And if you ask them, like, well, what about the thing itself? What about the damage? What about the death? What about the death and damage that you are ensuring with your inaction? I just don't think they care. I've never, you know, I've been at this for decades.
Yeah.
I've yet to get through. You know what I mean? So like, you just government's got to do stuff, whether these people like it or not. That's just the way it is.
Well, I think we will again. I think we'll throw them out, and I think we can use the threat that they will not be there forever to forestall much of the damage that Trump's declaration could cause.
We'll see. He's taken apart this is speaking of things that people aren't paying enough attention to. I mean, he is dismantling environmental regulation down to its like if we're gonna, you know, if we're gonna come back at this, we're gonna be starting from scratch. Like we are gonna be starting a regulatory or legislative approach from scratch because he's taken everything apart that we've.
So you mean
so
when Biden tried to make some regulatory changes and the court said, "Oh no, there's a major questions doctrine. You can't do that. Congress is required to make changes in regs like that." And now they're doing it willy-nilly, and we don't hear a peep from our courts. That's the world we're in, right?
I mean, I often say to people, like, I feel like the way the right has kind of burst out into the open in the last few years in a way that a lot of people are kind of seeing it nakedly for the first time and grappling with it. But I always say, those of us in climate world, we are very familiar with these dynamics going way back. And there is no area of law in which conservatives are more obviously playing Calvin ball. You know, if people get that reference, there's just no rules. They're just making it up as they go. They're just making it up as they go based on the outcomes they want. And that's true everywhere you look these days. All these legal arguments they're making these days have that feeling, but that started in climate. Like the way they've treated greenhouse gas regulations under the Clean Air Act is just so nakedly instrumental, and it's like they don't believe any of this stuff. They're just making up legal arguments on the fly because they know the Supreme Court's on their side and will accept whatever they say and will do whatever they want. So it's like the closer you look at climate law and at the legal arguments around climate regulations, the more sort of insane you go. And that major questions thing that you reference is one of the big ones. You know, to this day, that is so what they just did, the big news, I guess, of the last couple of weeks is that Trump is trying to formally rescind the EPA's endangerment finding. So way back in 2007, there was a Supreme Court case about this, back when there was a sane majority on the Supreme Court. There's a court case about this, and the court said, yes, greenhouse gases count as pollutants under the Clean Air Act. And so that triggers a bunch of legal obligations. One, EPA has to determine whether they're dangerous to human health. And if it determines that they're dangerous to human health, it has to regulate them, stationary sources, i.e. power plants, and mobile sources, i.e. cars. And that's been happening. So all that comes out of the endangerment finding, which is where EPA did the science and said, yes, climate is dangerous. They are trying to now undo the endangerment finding. They can't do it on the basis of science. They tried. I don't know if you followed this little subplot, but they tried to sort of pull together a council of kind of crank old climate deniers and meet in secret to come up with something that they could show a court to try to show that climate isn't dangerous. And the whole thing was such a farce. It got called out by the court for meeting in secret. It got disbanded. The whole thing was a farce. So they're not going after the science. Instead,
in climate, they can't. They certainly went after it in vaccines.
Sure. But the climate science, I think, has such a rich record now at this point that they just clown themselves when they try to go after this. So now it's all based on this major questions thing, which is they're saying if Congress had meant to regulate greenhouse gases, they would have said so. And this is, if you understand the Clean Air Act will make you dizzy when you hear that, because the whole effing point of the Clean Air Act, the fundamental structure of the Clean Air Act, is to say anything that is harmful to human beings in the air, we're going to regulate that to safe levels. They deliberately said in the law, we don't yet know everything in the air that might harm humans. Therefore, we're going to have this process every so often. EPA is going to meet and review the latest science, and we're going to stay current on the latest science on pollutants. The law was specifically designed so that new science could come along, new pollutants could be discovered, and would be regulated under the law. That is the nature of the law. And now they're using that very nature of the law to refute it. And it's like any judge who's been involved in these cases for decades is just gobsmacked at this, laughing at this in its face, and yet it is cruising right to the Supreme Court, and it's going to cruise right through.
Well, maybe. I mean, the litigation is going to be fierce on this.
Yes.
And, states are going to do their own thing, some of them. And I'm sure that the administration is going to try and say it's illegal for states to have emission standards that relate to greenhouse gases.
Well, this is what's interesting. I mean, I don't know how deep people want to get into this, but if you part of, there's been a lot of lawsuits about climate change because there's tangible damages now, and there are sort of like people you can identify who did the emitting. So there's a lot of lawsuits, and all those lawsuits in the U.S. thus far have been mooted. Why? Because the courts say EPA is regulating greenhouse gases. We can't sue people who are following the law. But if EPA is no longer regulating greenhouse gases, then all those lawsuits are back on the table. All those personal lawsuits about climate damages are back. It's going to be chaos. It's going to be madness. They are opening up a Pandora's box of madness with this ruling.
Yeah. Well, they are opening up. Yeah, they are.
I mean, they're opening, that's what they do. They open 20 Pandora's boxes. You can handle maybe one of them. You can even grapple intellectually with one or two of them. And then that's 18 horrible things going on that you don't even have time to track, much less fight.
Here, maybe this is a saying all over the country, but here in Chicago, particularly around politics, we have a saying that pigs get fat, hogs get slaughtered. And, right. And these guys are hogs. They have just said everything is ours. And after they lose, I expect the next Congress to look at who they are here and not allow the quick revision of history to say, oh, this was Donald Trump and we didn't know anything about it. And I expect, I expect us to say 0 subsidies for fossil fuels anymore. Carbon tax, you bet. Oil industry, you wanted to take our democracy down and the planet with you? Sorry, buddies, you're on your own.
I mean, I would love to think that, but, you remember very viscerally living through 8 years of George W. Bush, doing comically malign things, one after the other, you know, all the greatest hits we all remember, the Iraq War, Katrina, etc. But what people don't remember, to get back to this point about the flurry of activity that's hard to track, people have forgotten. Like, people remember like the A tier George W. Bush scandals. There were so many B and C and D tier scandals that have just been lost to history now. And I remember living through all that and thinking, by the end of his second term, I remember thinking distinctly, this is going to discredit the Republican Party for a generation. They are going to have to go into the wilderness and apologize and reform and rethink. Like, there's no way they're going to recover from this absolute fiasco of incompetence and malignant, you know, corruption. Like this is going to be world ending for them. This is going to change U.S. politics. And Edwin, they were back in the saddle within months.
Yeah,
months.
I don't want to pick
It
too
did
much
not last for weeks.
I agree with you. Look, I don't want to.
Why wouldn't that happen again? Why don't we think that's going to happen again?
Well, I don't want to pick too much on Barack, because I can't for a minute imagine the additional burdens of being the first black president in America. But you know, it is going to be required of whoever wins on our side that they spend every single day focusing on making America better, but telling everybody why this crowd made it worse. I mean, you know, when the Republicans were banished to the wilderness for 60 years, it was because FDR, I mean, Herbert Hoover wasn't a terrible man, but FDR made a point of making sure everybody understood those camps should be called Hoovervilles, and you know, and went after the Republicans for their ties to big business that hurt ordinary Americans. And we have to do that again. You know, the last couple Democratic regimes we're not ready to do that, and maybe the time wouldn't have allowed it, but we're there now.
I think you are reflecting a large swath of the Democratic base, a large swath of Democrats on the ground feel this way for sure.
Yep.
But I think we need to think about who runs things around here, the elites who control our institutions, our media, our politics. And one of the things I think about a lot is Donald Trump won the presidential election in 2024 by a squeaker. It was so close, barely won. And the elites of this country were like, welp, guess woke is over and we're all fascists now. Yep, let's do this. Like, they didn't hesitate. They were so ready. They were ready to jump on the fascism train. They were eager. They're like, oh, thank God that pressure to be good, to be better, to try to care. Thank God that's gone and we can all just be a-holes and say the word retard out loud now. Woohoo! They were so ready. They were ready for fascism. They were ready to call the game over after that battle. And those same elites are still there. They still hate
us.
An undergrad. They still hate an undergrad, you know, a pro-Palestinian activist more than they hate any MAGA person, more than they hate any ICE officer. Like, they still hate the Democratic base, hate and fear the Democratic base more than they fear the other side. Those people are still there. They still run things. So where is this energy for like a purge
I'm telling
going to come from?
It's coming. Those elites are losing that control. You know, anymore, you think of Davos and you think of the Epstein crowd, now that we understand what that is, as the same crowd, right? And you know, powerful people doing terrible things to people and protecting themselves. And
look at how other countries are handling that. I think it's so instructive. Look at what's happening in other countries. People are getting run out on the rails. They're getting thrown in jail. They're getting purged from polite society. And I heard from someone just the other day that they were talking privately to a prominent U.S. political journalist at a prominent U.S. political outlet who was telling them that they think Epstein is already overcovered in the U.S. and they're bored and tired with it and they want to move on. That's the U.S. That's U.S. elites.
Well,
they are the Epstein people. Like, why would we expect them to purge the Epstein class? They are that. So, who is going to do the things that you want to happen, I guess?
I'm going to tell you, this is one of my favorite questions because it isn't the elites. It has always been ordinary Americans. And I looked at what happened in Chicago when I showed up here, and the lessons we learned and what folks in Minneapolis learned from us and then improved upon and did themselves. Ordinary Americans are going to say, this crowd, as they did, the elites ran things in the 1890s, they ran things in the 1920s, and ordinary Americans had enough and said, no, not happening anymore. And we are at that point where the elites have run their time out. They have proven to be morally bankrupt and unfit for leadership in a democracy. I mean, God bless Harvard, the most elite of elite, is at least standing its ground. But
I would just ask you, though, a lot of things have changed since those previous episodes, most notably media and screens and the information environment and everything else. And people are not accustomed to getting off their computers and out into the streets anymore. And on the computers, these malign elites run the platforms on which we communicate with one another. They run the public internet. They run the AI. They run everything. How are we going to, how do you get around them at this point? Their control over our communication is so total.
But there was polling this last week that said, the casual news consumers. Remember when Trump won, there was this fabulous study that said the less you know about the news, the more you're likely to support
the most important graph to come out of that election. Understanding that is the core of everything. The less you know, the more likely you are to vote for Trump. That is a mathematical correlation.
It's not true anymore. There's new polling that says those guys have turned on them.
Yeah. I wonder, you and I have normal, I guess, what I think of as normal media habits, i.e., we read the Times, whatever.
I do not have a normal media habit. I
whatever
consume way
mainstream
too much news.
How do those people that we're talking about, those not quite connected, don't quite know what's going on people, somehow they were turned for Trump, and now somehow they've been turned against him. Mm-hmm. But do you understand that process? I don't. Who are they listening to?
They heard Trump say, "I'm going to make life more affordable," and then when life wasn't more affordable, they heard him say it was a hoax.
I don't even know if they. I don't. That ascribes a level of that ascribes an accurate understanding of events.
People understand their own reality.
They know groceries are more expensive.
They know groceries are more expensive.
I really think, and this might be a slight bit of naivete and hope on my part, but I want to think that the sight of masked government agents in the streets terrorizing ordinary people has triggered something in the American character that has been quiet for a good while, which is
we don't like being pushed around.
Tread on me, right? Yeah. That got stirred up. But again, that was 100% grassroots run, grassroots organized, grassroots everything. How do you scale it and make it enduring without some help from elites and elite institutions? That's what I see over and over again. This whole century is the people of the Democratic Party being failed by the leadership of the party and of prominent social institutions over and over again. And I just why wouldn't that happen again?
Too much. But right now, the people of the Democratic Party, and by the way, people of them, it isn't Democrat versus Republican anymore, because that Republican Party's gone. It's America versus MAGA, and the people are pushing their members of Congress, particularly the Democrats, to have a backbone for a change, and they're showing it. Dave, I think this is a real moment, and I think whatever your news consumption habits, everybody in America is as smart as everybody else. When they get information, they kind of think about it. They look at their lives, They look at, I mean, if you, God almighty, can you imagine being a farmer? Can you imagine like the life in rural America where your school's closing, your hospital's closing, and the markets for your grains have closed? They can't be possibly be saying that's the fault of a lefty in Chicago.
I don't know. Like everything that's happened in the last several decades in the U.S. rests on widespread ignorance and delusion among the population.
I know, and they want to keep us that way.
It would be odd if all of a sudden the public were well informed all of a sudden and were making rational judgments all of a sudden. I just think their turn. I mean, this is like me a dark thing to say, but like, I think you really have to take public ignorance. Like, if you look at the polls, you know, if you look at surveys, people have lives. They just don't have time to learn about politics. They don't know much. So I think like they probably were for Trump for reasons that are so kind of wacky and random that we can't even really guess or anticipate them. I think they probably have turned against Trump for equally sort of arbitrary and random and like media related reasons. Like, I don't trust.
I don't care what their
basically.
reasons are. I'm
I don't
happy to
trust
stand
it.
with them.
I don't trust whether it's enduring, I guess. I don't trust whether
but it's got to be terrifying to the elites. So we want to start saying to the elites, do you know what happens when the hoi polloi are going to, when we take over?
That's what we need.
When we take over, we're tearing it all down. And if you care about your stuff at all, you better switch sides today.
And if you look back at American history, at the peaks of progress, the peaks of progressive action, the kind of things that we all now look back on and say, isn't that great that we did that? The only reason America ever does anything like that is when elites are scared that the whole thing's going to fall apart under them if they don't do it. That's what happened in the 30s.
They should be scared. Let me ask you about Seattle.
I wonder.
Is there anything going on there that you live there? Are the people who work at Amazon and Starbucks and Microsoft, are the employees like banging the drums to say to their owners, what the hell are you doing?
Well, I mean, the main thing in Seattle is we had 1 million people downtown a couple of days ago.
Yeah.
That was to celebrate the Super Bowl, though not.
I know.
That wasn't it. Although,
by the way, congratulations. It was a great team.
There were numerous ice out chants throughout that event, needless to say. But, you know, I think like, I'll just say here, like, the people, the sort of demographic in the U.S. politics that gets the least attention and the least love, but is the most important to this country's ongoing health, is just your basic resistance mom, your basic like suburban mom who like doesn't want to get on social media and show her tail feathers and argue with all the other dicks on social media, is just like living her life, but sees cruelty and abuse and instinctively hates it and goes out onto the street to do something about it. It's those people who we never see profiles of, right? CNN never sends reporters out to like, let's go to the yoga studio in the suburb and talk to the moms. You know, it's always the rural diner, but like, it's these basic, you know, just ordinary people who are doing this, who are the heroes in all of this. I would like to see a politics that properly demonizes elites. Like, I want to see some real populism. Like this idea that the elites are the HR department that doesn't want you to say retard, that's the elite you're fighting, is so deranged. I would like to see some real populism where we're fighting the people who are really got their boots on our necks, i.e. the rich people and the powerful people. I would like to see some real, and I would like to see a politics that centers and celebrates ordinary moms, resistance moms. Let's put them at the center. Let's give them some flowers.
And their decency.
Profiles of them. By the way, they are more decent and more pleasant to talk to than any one of like 1,000 political pundits you could choose.
I mean, one of them was named Renee Good.
Yes, right? Precisely.
And they shot her. So for saying her last words, I'm not mad at you, dude, and they shot her.
Yes, it is. I mean, it is, like Bad Bunny says, it is love versus hate in about as stark a way as you're ever going to encounter in public life. Like this, there is, we libs, we love nuance. We're in love with our own nuance. We caress our own nuance.
Yeah, it's time just to pick a fight.
And tell odes to
time to pick a fight.
This is clear. This is love versus hate.
Right.
And it's time to choose a side. And I'm so sick of hearing U.S. elites, comfortable, wealthy people who are saying like, both sides are blah, blah. We need to move on beyond the partisanship. I'm so tired of that.
As long as they're on the side of hate, they're going down with everybody else.
Choose a side. There is no both sides to this anymore.
Totally agree. It's not Democrats and Republicans for sure.
Suburban moms
it's just
in
us
the
and
face
them.
or not.
I couldn't agree with you more. Hey, by the way, did you ever read the book Ministry of the Future?
I read parts of it. I couldn't get through the whole thing. I mean, too much of that book was like a series of white papers about climate change that I've already read.
You've already read. Okay.
I already know all that stuff. It's the first chapter of that book, though, is that sticks with you.
It does stick with you. And I thought about the first chapter when you were talking about it's good versus evil, because it brings us all the way back to the beginning. If these guys get what they want, that first chapter turns into our life.
Yes, and that's the thing is like, if your mindset is zero sum, which I think is the characteristic quality of MAGA, the characteristic quality of authoritarian personality, the authoritarian personality, reactionary politics, is just that you think everybody's out for themselves, like you are, right? You are out for yourself, and you think everybody else is too. Like those people, nothing's ever going to push them into cooperative action on climate change. Like you can just raise walls, even if climate change gets really bad and like migration gets really bad and like we have to abandon certain coastal cities, none of that's going to shake them into being good, cooperative, positive sum people. If you want any of modern problems solved, you need to elect decent people who care about other people and who respect the rule of law and who know how to build enduring institutions. That is the opposite of everything MAGA right now. Literally the opposite.
All right, let me ask you a question about markets in a way that's sort of not in politics. The insatiable appetite of AI is at the moment like sucking up energy like crazy. You can't get apparently intelligence is directly related to power in the AI world, right? You need, if you're going to be smarter, you need more power.
That's what they think now. We should at least put a pin in here and say it's still possible that developments in chip technology
that's where I'm going.
Could break that relationship somehow. We don't necessarily know.
Because they aren't going to be able to the power is generating heat, it's going to melt it down. They aren't able to, they sort of reached a limit. And maybe they're going to develop chips that don't give off heat, that are much more efficient. Their greed might help us solve some of these really big problems.
Well, I would say, there's a lot to say about the AI thing. There's a lot going on there.
Yeah.
And all I would say to my liberal brethren is just like, I'm on Blue Sky, and the Blue Sky crowd has decided AI's evil. It's the bad guy, top to bottom.
I'm not Blue Sky.
Nothing worth discussing. End of story. I just think it's too early. Like,
I agree. I'm not.
We don't know what this is yet. We don't know what it could do. We don't know what's going to happen. Just leave a little negative space in your heart to learn and be open to events. That's all I would say. But the one thing I would say is the one positive aspect of AI is that it is forcing conversations around energy that needed to happen anyway. Like we needed to electrify anyway. We needed lots more power anyway. We needed to spend on infrastructure anyway. They are coming along with giant bags of money. And that's how you make things happen in the U.S. is bringing giant bags of money. So they're making things happen that need to happen.
Well, that's a more positive place to end. But look, I agree with you. And this whole conversation's been fabulous, Dave. And it's not for those of you who don't know Dave Roberts' work, he's telling you everything you would ever want to know about climate and how we're thinking about it and how it intersects with politics. This conversation focused mostly on the politics.
Yeah, it's hard not to, it's hard to turn away these days.
Yeah. I'm really grateful for your work and for your time. I enjoyed this conversation a lot.
Thanks a lot, Edwin. Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon. Bye. Bye. All right, everybody, welcome back. A little after 2:00 here in Chicago, and not too terrible day outside for the weather. All right, I want to introduce you. You guys know Mike Nellis. He's been on before. He's been on all over WCPT with other hosts, and he should be. He's a political strategist, an entrepreneur, a creator. He hosts Endless Urgency, which you should subscribe to and watch. It's fun and smart. He talks to fascinating guests, even on occasion me. So I get to get a plug in when I can. And he's just a terrific guy and a very smart observer of what's going on. Hey, Mike.
How you doing, buddy?
Good. So, I mean, the news kind of gives us lots to talk about, but I just had a fantastic discussion with Dave Roberts, who is a wonderful guy, mostly focused on climate, but the intersection of climate and politics. And he was, a lot of our conversation ended up in this place where is America ready to take on its own elites because of the failure of elites in this moment? And I would like to get your insight on that.
Yeah, well, I hope America's ready to take on its elites because it's the only way we're ever going to solve the myriad of crises that we're dealing with right now. And the way that I would frame it for people is there are two classes of people in this country. There's the Epstein class, and then there's everybody else. Period. End of story. Yeah. And if you're wondering, go ahead.
For me, the Epstein class and the Davos class are the same group.
Yeah, no, that's the point that I was going to make is like, if you're wondering why there are, hundreds, if not thousands of very wealthy, well-connected people that can abuse kids and never go to prison. It's the same reason that there are people that destroyed the economy in 2008 and cost tens of millions of Americans their jobs and their homes in the 2008 financial crisis. It's the same group of people that get a tax cut every time we have a Republican president. Well, your taxes get higher. Well, everything gets more expensive. It's the same scandal. Stephanie Miller said this to me like 2 weeks ago. It's all one story, Edwin. It's just one story. There's not a ton of scandals. It's just one. And it's the same one. We've got to break these people. And I'm not sitting here saying that if you're out there and you're wealthy or you've made $1 billion, you're necessarily a bad guy. But this system is broken and you're either with us or you're not. And the Epstein scandal is the perfect example of how broken this is.
Yeah, totally right. It also, Donald Trump's superpower was that Americans thought he was one of us. I'm not going to get pushed around to be politically correct about everything. It just made it feel like he was one of us. And then when he just sided with the Epstein crowd over everybody, it like the veils dropped from people's eyes. I want my ballroom for the same crowd. I want my $1 billion so I can be one of them, or 10 billion, whatever he's saying he's going to take from the Treasury. I think people understand he's not on our side anymore, and that I don't know how he recovers from that.
He's never going to recover from this unless suddenly the economy starts chugging along and everything gets cheap again and jobs come back and the market starts growing again. It's just not going to happen. So he's trapped, and he built his entire political brand around being a class trader, right? Remember the stuff about I don't pay taxes, I abuse the system, I take advantage of it. People like that stuff, and they like the way that he talked about it. And I've said this 1,000 times, Trump is really good at identifying the issues that exist in America that drive the American people crazy, but he has no interest in solving them, and he has no good ideas to solve them either. So, but what he did was he goes, I'm going to break this system. We're going to drain the swamp. We're going to take on these elites. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And he hasn't done any of it because he's a part of that. And where he was upset is that when he first entered politics, it was because he wasn't really a billionaire. Now he's clearly one of the richest people on the planet. He's like Putin. We'll never know fully how wealthy he is because it's going to be all overseas. And we'll just never really know. And now he can be in the rooms with he wants, and he can wine and dine and abuse his power to make people bow to him and get Jeff Bezos to pay $45 million for Melania's stupid documentary, while the average American can't pay their bills. So he gets what he wants, but is your life better than it was a year ago? Because I doubt it.
No, the Sun-Times, God bless the Chicago Sun-Times. They have been tracking the price of grocery items for a year. They got a basket of 35 items and they go in every week and they buy them and they get the price and they talk about like, oh, I can get this one with a discount. I mean, they shop like we shop, like, where's my coupon? And they reported that like the prices are up double digits, more than, I think it was like 12, 13% more than they were a year ago. I mean, and people know, I mean, I know that I like have abandoned my grape nuts not because I can't afford the box at $9, but who wants to pay $9 for a box of grape nuts?
This is how I am with Honeycrisp apples, because the price is so absurd for one apple right now. And I'm like, this is my one treat on my diet that I'm allowed to have. And they're so expensive, but I'll go one step further with you on that, because when and I think, I go on Fox and Newsmax and all these other places and I get in their faces and argue with them and they'll go, but Mike, the cost of gasoline, it's so much cheaper. Like, why is that not a good thing? And I'm like, look, it's a good thing that gas is cheaper. By the way, it's about 10 cents cheaper, which is not nothing, but it ain't that much either. But the difference is, now look at the price of buying a car. The average car payment in America today is $750 a month. So what's the value of gas being cheaper if you're paying a couple extra $100 if you can't have a car? Yeah. It's like, what's the value of having like free speech if you don't have a good education so that you can actually have a good idea every now and again?
Yeah, I mean, and they'll pick the things that were prices don't go in unison. So gas prices go down, but other prices go up, and on average, prices are up. And it's not like, again, it's not always the president's fault that there's inflation, but this president has done nothing to make it better, and he's done everything to make it worse.
This president can't even acknowledge that there's a problem. Like he flew out to Iowa a couple of weeks ago to give a speech specifically about affordability. And the first thing out of his mouth was, inflation is dead. I killed the inflation. And I'm like, you have to admit that there's a problem in order to then talk to people about what your solution to the problem is. And again, you're right that they're going to cherry pick, but if you look at the growth in the economy in this last year, almost all of it is either AI and tech, which is killing jobs, or it's healthcare. The healthcare industry is growing. And the reason the healthcare industry is growing and making so much money is because they're jacking everybody's premiums right now. So again, you're getting killed on energy. You're getting killed on car payments. You can't afford to buy a house. You can't afford your groceries. And Donald Trump's out there building himself a ballroom and throwing 1920s flapper parties with like pretty women in giant champagne glasses. And he wonders why his approval rating is hovering in the mid-30s.
I wonder why his approval rating is hovering in the mid-30s.
Yeah, well, that's from a different POV.
Yep. Oh my gosh. And so he's got this administration that he put together dedicated to the proposition that everything is his. That's what they're there for. And, I want to just ask you about the Wall Street Journal story about DHS and the complete chaos. It begins by saying Kristi Noem fired a pilot because he didn't move her blanket from one plane to another when she switched. But that's just the start. I mean, how is it that are we so numb? So numb that just the crazy. I mean, they think she's going to be president. Anybody who thinks she's going to be president needs to get their head checked. I mean, now it says all that video they're taking of their stormtroopers on our streets that they have taken of their stormtroopers on our streets that they're proud of. They thought that would make Kristi Noem president. I mean, president of Mars maybe, but not a country on this planet.
Well, I like to remind people about the recording that DHS does that the Nazis filmed everything too. Yeah. And I'm not one to call this administration Nazis, which is not because I don't think they're fascists. It's because I think Nazis were dramatically worse than what they're doing. And just when you really sit down and think about it. But again, people who are arrogant and abuse power think that they're never going to lose an election, think that they're never going to be held accountable, and they will be. And it will be in part because they recorded everything, which is a really stupid thing for them to do. Regardless of all of that, on Kristi Noem, the thing about the blanket is hysterical. You have to laugh at it. I don't know what else.
I did. I laughed out loud.
I know. It's literally, I don't know if you've ever seen the Amazon Prime show, The Boys, which is sort of like a dystopian superhero fascism thing. Oh my God, you have to watch it. It's literally a plot point where the main evil supervillain gets a guy fired because he put a blanket in the wrong place. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, life imitates art. I don't know how else. It's just insane. But he's also, Noem is also dating Corey Lewandowski. And I'll just give you my personal window into this, which is that I debated Corey Lewandowski on News Nation about a week before Alex Preddy was murdered. It was in between when Renee Good was murdered, and I was brought on to debate with him about that. And I said, look, my advice to the administration would be to rethink what you're doing in Minneapolis, because people are getting hurt. The American people are upset. And Corey Lewandowski, who is a smug, I can't curse on your show, right? Because we're on the radio.
Sorry.
Smug SOB. Yeah. I think I could probably get away with that.
Yeah, right? You can do that.
Yeah. Okay, great. Is a smug SOB. He goes, oh yeah, we're going to rethink everything. We're going to rethink how to double down. We're going to think how to double down on everything. And then immediately they get Alex Preddy murdered, which is somehow, I didn't think it could be worse visually what I saw happen to Renee Good. And then they did what they did to Alex Preddy. Like, it's unbelievable. And I don't believe that either of the officers that murdered those two people are actually going to be held accountable. So to me, that's more important than anything. It's the way they abuse their power. It's the way that they protect their own. And it's like, I don't really care that they're having an affair. Like, I couldn't care less. Like, who cares? There's a million people in Washington having affairs right now and being brazen about it. I care that people are dying and getting hurt, and that everybody else's life is getting worse.
I agree with you, although I'm going to take some time and say re-outfitting a 737 MAX so that they can have a private chamber for their affair in the back is repulsive.
That I agree with. It's the same as like when they built in the Pentagon, they built Pete Hegseth like his own makeup studio or something. Yeah. And they spent like whatever it was, like $75,000. And I was like, really? Like, it's just, you know, again, Trump gets his ballroom, Kristi Noem gets her weird sex plane. Like, it's unbelievable. And you have to laugh. It's all you could do.
Yes, while it's going on, but we also have to. I think we've crossed the line in America, and it's a line that I love. I mean, I just think the Republicans have created this dark place, this little corner that is so ugly and so out of step with America that. I mean, a little bit like in, the murder of those little girls in a church in 1964, that led to the Civil Rights Act. Just so terrible that Americans, and this isn't party anymore. This is just, well, maybe if the party's MAGA, America versus MAGA, that we're just sick of it. And there's the generous, optimistic spirit of this country, that what we saw in Renee Good, whose last words were like, I'm not mad at you, dude, before they shot her in the face, or Alex Preddy helping somebody in the ground before they shot him in the back. The spirit of this country is like, we're done with this.
Yeah. You always see the best of America at the same time that you see the worst of it, because, I've seen that image of, Dr. King crossing on the bridge, or like I went to the University of Notre Dame. There's a famous statue of Father Hesburgh, who was the president at the time, marching with Dr. King. Like, you don't get images like that unless you get the bombing in Montgomery, or you get, all the hangings and everything else that's terrible. And so, like, there's a good that comes with the bad, and the good always beats the bad. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, it does. And my view of this is, I think we're all, generally speaking, he wasn't a perfect president, but we all love Barack Obama and saw that for what it was, an opportunity for progress. You don't get Obama without George W. Bush. You don't. And the Bush years were terrible. Like, that, Edwin. They were awful. And like, this is worse on many different levels.
Yeah, because the Bush years weren't lawless like this.
Well, they were lawless in their own way, but
in their own way, for sure. Yeah. But he went to Congress to get the right to go to Iraq. Congress gave it to him, but he went there.
Right. Right. And again, I'm not justifying Dick Cheney and the unitary executive theory or any of that. But
that brought us here. Yep.
Yeah, right. That gets us here. It's the same thing as like the authorization for use of force, which was passed by Congress. It's the same justification for Obama blowing up terrorists in Yemen is the same thing blowing up boats in the Caribbean. We need to rein in executive power for sure. But again, if we're going to get a president that's this bad, that's this corrupt, then the answer needs to be nominating a Democratic candidate in 2028, who, in my opinion, I frame it this way, has to adopt the largest, most ambitious set of economic populist policies that we have seen since FDR to rebuild the New Deal, to create something better on top of it in a world with AI and robotics that's going to crush the working class no matter what we do. Like, we can fight that, but you never win a fight with technology like that, in my opinion. We have to regulate it for sure, but we're not going to win that over time, in my opinion. So we've got to create a series of policies.
We can make it work for us if we
exactly. Yeah, and maybe we could prevent it from getting everybody killed. Because, like, I don't know if you saw this week, I think it was like Claude talking about like murdering people because didn't want to be shut off. Like, it's just like scary stuff. But then the other thing is, we need to also go back and look at like what Teddy Roosevelt did, where we need to bust the Epstein class. Like we have to break up these monopolies. We have to restore law and order. It's just unbelievable what this class of people think they can get away with, what they are getting away with, not what they think they can. They know they can.
So there will be the cool, considerate heads who say, oh, you're just talking radical talk. You're going to drive people away. You're the kind of Democrat who's going to force everybody to vote Republican. I hear it all the time. I hear it from Democrats that sometimes I like, but they're afraid to go where you just went.
Yeah, it's stupid, and that's where I'm at. And I'm not some like fire breathing like liberal Democrat. Like I'm frankly, I think you could consider me anti woke. Like I thought a lot of woke culture was really stupid. I've been calling it out for a long time. But my view of it is, how do we have a direct and meaningful impact on somebody's life? Okay. And I break it up this way. We have to create the conditions for people to be able to take a risk and succeed and start a family and retire with dignity, and not with some boring like think tank policy that's called the blah, blah, blah act, where you file, Form 59B with the IRS and you get a $75 tax rebate every 2 years. Like it's got to be big, bold, and ambitious. I don't think it has to be that we adopt every single thing that Bernie Sanders and AOC say. And I like AOC, by the way, because I think she's a serious person and a serious legislator who wants to help people. The answer is not going to be some, choice between Zohran Mamdani and Dean Phillips. Like, I don't care about that. Like, I want to find people that want to get some stuff done, that want to solve these problems and come up with some ways to immediately impact people's lives. And generally speaking, beyond that, Edwin, I'm like half a libertarian. I think the government should just leave you alone. I don't think the government should tell you who you can or cannot marry. I don't think it should tell you a woman what to do with her body and whether or not she can have an abortion. I don't even think the federal government should have the right to tell a local school district who can or cannot play girls volleyball, which is something that like the Republican Party used to believe in stuff like that, but they don't. So how do we get the government off of people's backs while at the same time creating a pathway for folks to work hard, be the individual and live the life that they want, and then succeed and be able to, I don't know, buy a house and take a darn vacation every now and again.
Yeah. Well, the politics of that require that we have that agenda, that we are able to articulate it, but also that we pick an enemy. I mean, let's not be afraid of the fight.
Yeah.
FDR wasn't afraid of the fight. I don't think we've had a president who's a tough fighter really since Bill Clinton. And he was in an era where that fighting wasn't against these corporate interests. It was, in fact, worked with them. Right? They'll take care of themselves. We're not going to put corporate America out of business. But we're going to put their backs to the wall until they decide they're going to work with the country, not against the country.
I think you can give them an ultimatum and you can go to them and say, listen, you're not going anywhere and I'm not going anywhere, but we can make your life very difficult. Or you can work with us and we can figure out the path forward here. And we know that they're willing to cave to people in power. 100%. And we have to use power the same way that Donald Trump and his administration uses power, but we have to do it to help the working class. Period. End of story. And to your point earlier about where I sit in the ideological spectrum, like one, I don't really have an ideology. I only care about getting stuff done and helping people. But beyond that, we're sort of trapped in the Democratic Party right now between, I would argue, like the term moderate or centrist, which is really just code for weak and corporate. Okay. There's some good ideas and some good people over there, but then I feel also trapped with like a group of like leftists that are not serious about legislating and are not practical in getting anything done. And you have people that, and I'm not saying it's not an important issue. Like what's happening in Israel and Palestine is very, very serious and very important. And I believe Israel was committing a genocide against the Palestinian people, but like they're so focused on that. And I'm like, and you know this because you're a former alderman, like, can we fix a road or build a bridge here at home? So like, I feel trapped between just like two weird places where like I don't find a home in either, because one side is really weak and the other side is strong and passionate and willing to fight for what they believe in, but then they pick the wrong topics. They pick the wrong things the wrong hills to die on.
This is the moment, Mike, where all of that is helpful because it's a big tent. We are going to say to everyone, look, we need you to, I'm willing to stand with them. I'm willing to stand with, let me say it differently. When I went to the No Kings rally, one of them last summer, I went with people who, two of them used to be Republicans. We stood next to people who were chanting about Palestine. 15 feet away was a group that had a banner calling themselves the American Communist Party. And you know what? Everybody was there for the same reason. And I think that's how we win. And I'm perfectly happy to stand with all of them. When it comes to governing, we need serious people. We need serious people, but tough people too. You know,
The only thing I'll say is like, and this is my, again, the moderate wing of the party is weak and uninterested in solving problems or doing anything interesting, in my opinion. But the left, again, and I'll stand with anybody. Like, this is not a moment where I'm picking and choosing my allies, but
yep.
I do think like there's a level of, we need some practical leaders on the left. It's why when people ask me who I want the nominee to be in 28, I list AOC as one of those people because I think she's a serious person. She's a serious legislator. You saw it this week as she represented the country on the world stage talking about foreign policy. Yeah. Zohran Mamdani is a guy I don't agree with everything, but he's a serious person. And part of what upsets me about not the two of them, but the way that like the DSA responds to them. And I have some respect for the DSA, but like how many people in DSA membership are mad at AOC and Zohran Mamdani right now for random stuff that that neither of them can really control? Instead, like Zohran Mamdani's like, I'm going to make sure that the roads get plowed when it snows. I'm going to make sure that we can help people. That's the job of a legislator.
Totally a job of a mayor, for sure. I definitely don't. I don't worry about the DSA. I don't even worry about the DCCC. I don't even worry about the DNC. They're going to follow the enormous numbers of Americans that are going to come out and make this decision themselves. And I actually think our primary system, which the DNC has something to do with, the primary is going to give us a winning candidate who is serious. I have that much confidence in Americans to think that I don't have to have a candidate today. I have to have a primary system that that tests these candidates.
Yeah, I think one of the most important things that we have to have is a big, messy, vibrant Democratic primary. Yep. I want no thumbs on the scale. I want it to be fair. I want it to be representative. And I want there to be 50,000 candidates. And we can all roll our eyes at it. But I'm not entirely convinced that the 2028 nominee is anybody that we're talking about.
I agree.
And I got a little bit yelled at on the internet because Stephen A. Smith was like, I'm thinking about running for president. And I don't think Stephen A. Smith is a serious candidate. I want to be clear about that. I am not supporting him. But I think given how angry people are at the Democratic base, if our candidates don't rise to the moment that we're in, they're going to turn to an outside force. Maybe it's Stephen A. Smith, maybe it's Jon Stewart, maybe it's somebody else. I don't know. But I think there's an opening for what happened to the Republican Party to happen to us if one of our leaders doesn't build a coalition that can deliver victory in the primary and meet the moment. And I see people who are meeting that moment because I really like what J.B. Pritzker's doing. I like what John Ossoff is doing. I like what Shapiro's doing. I like what AOC's doing. So there are people that are doing it. I just worry we get hijacked if we don't take this stuff seriously.
I agree with you. But again, I see people meeting the moment. I like your list. There are more. And, I mean, there were city council people in Minneapolis. There were, my gosh, even some aldermen in Chicago who met the moment when it mattered. Yep. I mean, and I listened to the right wing talk about God, left, right, and center, and then I listened to Raphael Warnock.
Right.
Right. I mean, I am not worried about talent in the Democratic side. They will just have to have a process where we can find the ones we want for this moment.
I think that's right. And then the other thing, and this is more of a process thing, but I bring it up to people because as the resident Democratic strategist on these shows is, part of the reason the Democratic Party is not as strong right now as it should be is we should have had a big messy primary in 23. Yep. But Biden decided to run. Had we had like 20 candidates that put together campaigns, we would have more talent, more tech, more tools, more strategies. We would be in a better position right now. And frankly, I think we would win more seats in 26 if we had all those people. Right now, listen, for folks that don't know me, I'm an entrepreneur. I run a couple of different Democratic consulting firms, a digital firm. I'm part of a TV firm, et cetera. Like, it's hard to find good people right now under the age of like 30. And it's because we didn't have an influx of young, idealistic people who got involved in the presidential primary in 23. There are some who did that got involved thanks to Kamala's campaign after Biden dropped out, but it's not nearly as many. For instance, like my entry into Democratic politics was being young and stupid enough when I was 18 to think that we could elect the first Black president and win the Iowa caucus, which turns out I was right about. But we need more young, idealistic people to take risks, even if they fail, because they go on to do great stuff.
Yeah, well, it's coming. That's why I just see this huge, great spirit rising in our country. I see the sails getting full, and the people who have built the dams are about to be swept away.
Yes, and you can tell when you see some of the fractures in the MAGA movement of the people who can see that. Like, why did Marjorie Taylor Greene suddenly decide that she was going to break away from Donald Trump? It's because she can read the same polls that you and I can, Ed, when she can sense the same thing that we see. Why is Joe Rogan and Andrew Schultz and the rest of these podcast guys suddenly crapping on Donald Trump all the time? They see the same stuff that we do. And by the way, I'm sure to a certain degree, some of it's real. I don't think anything about Marjorie Taylor Greene is real. I don't think she's a friend or an ally. But again, in this moment, my only evaluation of the fight right now is Epstein class versus not Epstein class. That's it. I don't care about anything else. I'm not fighting about 2016 Democratic primary again. I don't care who you voted for in 24. Are you going to help me break this class of people up or not? Are we going to actually get back to doing something that's going to help people? If you want to be a part of that, you're my brother, you're my sister in this moment.
You know what? And I recorded a conversation that's going to play right after this with Mike Tomasky, who's the editor-in-chief in the New Republic. And you know,
I know Mike. I've met Mike. He's a good dude.
He feels the same way.
Good.
You know, and Dave Roberts, who I talked to before, feels the same way. And it turns out that all across this land of sort of folks who are thinking about democracy from our side are kind of getting to the same place, which I love. They're getting, Mike, to the same place, which is, wait a minute, it isn't, I mean, yeah, it's climate change. Yeah, it's housing prices. Yeah, it's healthcare. Yeah, it's, you know, the quality of our schools. Yes, it's our infrastructure. Yeah, it's even immigration. But really, why is it all of those things? Because the people who are supposed to be the grown-ups in the room have screwed us.
Yes, it's the same group of people screwing us over and over again, regardless of who the president is, regardless who's in control of Congress. Yep. Breaking this has to be the primary priority of whatever the next version of American politics looks like. It just has to be. Otherwise, we're never going to solve climate change. We're never going to increase your wage. We're never going to bring back the job market. And yeah, maybe the stock market will keep going up, but only because the same 7 companies are buying into themselves. All of these tech giants keep putting money into each other to make the stock market go big. So it's just getting back to some semblance of fairness. And I want to add one more thing here, and you let me know if we're running up against time because I don't know how long I'm on.
We are. So I add the one more thing.
Okay, I'll add the one more thing is like, I spend so much time thinking about how ridiculous the way that the economy works is. We spend so much time talking about income equality so that we could, you know, have women go out into the workforce, and we should do nothing to get in the way of that right now because women under 30 are crushing it in this economy. But it's not real equality when, like, my brother and my sister-in-law both have to work full-time 40, 50-hour a week jobs just to barely scrape by and afford a starter house. Like, that's not equality. It's not. It used to be that you could, and it's amazing to me that the Republicans are always nostalgic for everything about the 50s, except for wages and prices and fairness in the economy. We have to get back to that without going back to Leave It to Beaver world, if that makes sense.
Yep. That's going to be the last word. But Mike, always great to catch up.
Of course. I love doing your show, Edwin. You're the man.
Thank you. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
All right, everybody, we're going to take a brief break. And as I hinted, Mike Tomasky is with us right after in a recording that I made yesterday. It's really good. Stay tuned.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
Thanks for coming. I have a great conversation. My friend, Michael Tomasky, editor-in-chief of the New Republic, it continues to stun me how relevant and important the New Republic is. Please sign up. And we're going to spend some time today on a particular piece that Michael wrote, and that will just make you all the more eager to sign up for the New Republic. He's thoughtful. He is determined, and this publication has not just survived, it's thrived, which is really hard to do these days. Michael, welcome back.
You're too kind, but it's always great to be here.
Hey, I want to spend almost all our time today on your piece about what Democrats need to do now, because I read it and I thought it was fascinating, and I have a couple questions. I liked almost all of it. But before we get to that, it's been a week. Do you have, I have, there were sort of 4 things about this week that struck me, but I'd like to know just what about this week was sort of highest on your list of, oh my?
The obvious choice is the Bondi hearing, which was just beyond comprehension. But if I were to move beyond that, the Justice Department and the U.S. Attorney for the District of Columbia failing to get a grand jury to indict in a federal case that it brought is a very, very rare thing. And they failed. Of course, people will know, I think, what I'm referring to secure indictments against the 6 Democrats who made that video a while back, telling people that people in the armed services that they could and indeed should disobey illegal orders. And so Hegseth went after them and Jeanine Pirro, and they couldn't even get an indictment.
No.
It's a massive humiliation for the United States government.
And in case people didn't know, it's also a massive affirmation of the view that this Justice Department is rogue and political.
Yeah.
Right? Because this is like the last check and balance that stood in the way of what would have been a criminal indictment. It never should have happened.
It never, ever should have happened. That I hope it never will happen now. And it connects to what Ann Bondi did before that committee on Wednesday, because it's just all part of the same story. It's just illegal, unethical, immoral, astonishing what these people are trying to do and think they can get away with.
I'm not a writer like you. I walked around the block with my dog and tried to think, like, how do I describe Pam Bondi's behavior in that hearing? And I think, to me, it was so contemptuous, but it says a lot about what the Trump administration thinks Congress is there for. They are there to be their chorus line and high kick on demand. And if they don't, and if they aren't standing behind dear leader and doing their high kicks, they're going to get surveilled by the executive branch and indicted by the executive branch, which is what she said.
Yeah.
I mean, but happily, she said, no, we really don't want you to be murdered by our partisans out there. And I will look at that. But that's a terrible place to draw the line.
It sure is. And as I wrote this morning in a little piece, quick reaction piece I wrote to it, just imagine, so she comes, imagine the prep sessions for this hearing at the Justice Department, right? Think about what went into those, okay? She and a bunch of aides, all of whom being paid by you and me and the people listening to this program, to conduct the people's business on a nonpartisan basis.
And have oversight, which is something we supposedly believe in. Yeah.
Right. Sat around for how many hours, Edwin, and decided that, and they invented little retorts for her for every Democratic member of Congress, little insults for her for every Democratic member of Congress, for every Democratic member of, not of Congress, but of the committee, for every Democratic member of that committee, finding some person in their district who was, hurt in some way by an undocumented immigrant, or finding an undocumented immigrant who committed a crime. They did all this kind of research, and they thought up all these zingers for her, and they, and this is what they thought was a proper use of taxpayer resources to do this, to do that kind of thing. And it must have taken hours. And I bet they walked out of there on Wednesday thinking that they hit a home run. I bet they walked out of there on Wednesday thinking that they completely owned those stupid lips.
And Audrey had a different point of view. So,
right.
They're in this little box where if they make Donald Trump happy, they think it's a victory. But America, the spirit of our country is in a different place.
Sure.
I had a couple others on my list. I think the sellout of the planet for a handful of petrodollars was a pretty amazing turn of events for the world. Happened this week.
That's for sure.
And I think we're going to find that the departure of the head of antitrust, also from the Justice Department, is going to make way for, more M&A work, more consolidation of the media, again, selling Americans out for this. And, they're the Davos crowd, they're the Epstein crowd, these people who think that they rule the world. And Americans have finally said, we get it. It's our turn.
Bondi's hearing, as I wrote again this morning, may not even have been the worst thing she did this week. The worst thing she did this week may have been the firing of Gail, what's her name?
Right.
The antitrust person, because she, I'm sorry, I'm spacing on her last name, but she had a pretty decent reputation.
Yeah.
And she was trying to do some things. And I know some of the progressive people I know who are in the anti-monopoly world were kind of cheering for her.
Well, that would be me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, I'm kind of progressive, but I'm definitely in the anti-monopoly world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I figured you had to be to even know this had happened.
Yeah.
Because this was under the radar of a lot of people. But she was taking on Google.
Mm-hmm.
And but now, she's just been told, no, you don't
There's
do
the
this.
door. Yeah.
Things. Yep.
Well, so they're going to try and have everything. And I mean, again, I don't think you and I've talked about this. I wrote this a while ago, that when Donald Trump was sworn in a year ago, he formed a dedicated the government dedicated to the proposition that everything is his. Everything is his. And he's creating a government just to line his pocket. I think Americans are sick of it. But you've talked about in this piece that I really want to dive into, how we get out of this mess. And I don't just mean how we win the next election, but how we get out of this mess, how we recover what's best of us, and build a future that's best for everybody, which I loved.
Yeah, well, that's the point of doing this, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. So let's talk about the piece. I mean, your first part is fight like hell with MAGA.
Yeah.
Talk about that. Talk about your insight into why Democrats have not done that in the past.
Well, Democrats, the fighting just doesn't come quite as naturally to them. I was at some event and I heard a guy say, we were talking about a range of issues, and this was last summer, so people were frustrated with Democrats, not putting up enough of a fight against Trump. And this one guy said, well, Democrats come to Washington to pass laws and Republicans come to Washington to fight. And that's really very true. Democrats earnestly want to get things done. They want to move by consensus. They want to pass legislation to help people and do things and make the environment cleaner, whatever it is. And Republicans, this generation of Republicans, has been taught at a whole bunch of training academies and things like that, and just by osmosis through Fox News and everything, that the Democrats and the liberals are going to destroy the United States of America, their tawdry values, and that you need to go to Washington to fight that. And these people are your enemy, and you got to fight. Yeah. And they're better at it.
Well, I think when I was reading it, I was reminded that, look, for their agenda, for the agenda that frankly they've been paid for to go there to do, if they can make Washington dysfunctional, they had already done, because they what they feared was what Washington could do for a long time, and they were getting what they wanted in the states. So if they could just push it off to the states, they after they captured all those state legislatures when Obama was, in his first midterm, I think they just thought, we get everything we want if the federal government does nothing, and we can rely on the states and our friends in the Supreme Court. So their fighting was nihilistic fighting. It didn't have to win anything.
Right. That's right.
Yeah.
So anyway, the main point of the piece is, I start with the question that emerged from the last election. Democrats lost working class support. So how do they win back some working class support? Enough working class support. So that's sort of that's basically what the piece is about. I say, well, to do that, you have to, it's pretty simple. You got to show working class people that you care about their problems. And to do that, you can't just do that by saying, well, I support such and such a policy. You have to do that by starting a fight. You have to, on their behalf, you have to do that by welcoming conflict.
Yeah.
There are specific actors who are making people's lives hard. Corporate bad actors who are nickel and diming people and preventing them from getting better wages and jacking up their rent through these algorithms and this and this and that. And I could go on and on and on. And I do. The piece is 10,000 words. But I say what Democrats need to do is start fights with these bad corporate actors who are making working people's lives harder. That will produce conflict. Working people will notice. Working people will say, hey, they're taking my side.
I want to say I can't believe. I mean, I read it. I didn't think it was 10,000 words. It kind of went pretty quick because you mean. But the other thing, though, like before you get to who we should fight, you also had a cautionary note for us that we should stop fighting with ourselves.
Yeah, I have a section in there toward the beginning about why the centrists and the progressives feud so much. And, some of it is necessary. Some of it is inevitable. And they have genuine ideological disagreements. But there's a kind of a weird psychological element to it. And I write in the piece, I've said in many meetings in Washington over the years with progressives where I've seen progressives get a lot more worked up talking about Bill Clinton than they ever did talking about George Bush. And I've said in meetings with moderates where they get a lot more worked up talking about left-wing litmus tests than they do about anything emanating from the right. So there's some psychological strange thing going on there. And that's what people just have to drop. The moderates and progressives disagree about 30% of things, 20, and they agree about 70 or 80.
Yeah.
They only ever talk about the 20 or 30. They never talk about 70 or 80.
And I think the gap is smaller than it was when Bill Clinton ran.
Yeah, I think so.
Times are a lot different. Yeah, they're a lot different. And we've seen, because we've had a couple decades of it, we've seen the damage that is being done by corporate greed in ways that we didn't fully or by the way we've done globalization in ways we didn't fully understand in the 90s. Yeah. All right. So I love tell stories with villains, and you're the villains that you talk about are the ones that are leading the economic carnage. They're the monopolists that I don't like. They're the corporate, like, we're going to nickel and dime you with fees forever because we can get away with it. They're we're going to give you, we're going to make it impossible for you to go see a concert because the concert ticket is $70, but you can't get it for less than $200.
Right.
Who are all these middlemen? Well, the drug middlemen, hundreds, right? There was a category of villain you left out that I want to ask you about.
Okay.
Just as should this be part of the fight? The white Christian nationalist, you are going to believe what I believe. And you are going to look the way I look, or you don't belong in America. And you didn't single them out as a villain. You were focused on the economics, which is, I think, true to your work. But I wonder how you think about a two-front fight.
I'm for a 2, 3, 4 many front fight. I really am, and that's another thing that drives me nuts about the Democratic Party, and some of these different schools within it. Like this argument that you've heard, and I'm sure your listeners would, oh, no, we shouldn't get bogged down in this democracy debate. Let's just talk about prescription drug prices. Well, no. I mean,
I have no patience for that.
Yeah. No, that's just insane. It's just insane. It's not how people live. People's lives, all these things are coming at people all the time. You just have to kind of tie them together. That's all. Our democracy is suffering because of Donald Trump, but it's also suffering because of all this cash that's been injected into it by these people who are preventing you from having reasonably priced prescription drugs. It's all part of the same story. I mean,
in a well-functioning democracy, we end up with better outcomes for people because the folks who are there are working for the people who sent them there. The problem, and I think Americans have reacted to this, is they don't feel the democracy is working for them every day, and they aren't wrong. But the answer to that isn't to jettison, it's to fix it. And the reason it isn't working for us is that it's been bought. It's that after the Powell memo, right? The right wing went to work. They bought themselves a Supreme Court, who then said, "Hey, we don't have to. We can have Citizens United, and we can have gobs of this dark money," and they made the democracy work badly, which is what people are feeling. So your point that we have to explain how they're connected, how a functioning democracy leads to better outcomes, it is really important. It means that it isn't one or the other.
And I don't think it should be that hard to do. I mean, this. I don't know. Democrats they often have a very passive posture toward all these things, and they look at polls and they say, well, okay, I guess we shouldn't do this. I guess we shouldn't try to talk about this. Whereas a lot of times I've noticed in my career, Republicans look at polls and say, all right, that's not a very good number. Let's change it.
Yep. Yeah.
Let's change the poll.
Yeah. I think Democrats are getting, first off, I should say differently. I know Democrats are getting there. The last Democrats to get there are going to be the leadership in Washington.
Yeah. Right.
Because like I'm talking to Democrats all over the country, boy, they get it. And they are out there pushing. Yeah. And I think they've given some courage to the ones in Washington we've seen this week.
Yes.
Unusual now.
Yeah. No. Democrats around the country get it. In addition to my piece and a handful of others by my colleagues that we have published in this March issue of the New Republic, a special issue about the future of the Democrats, we commissioned a poll of 2,400 rank and file Democratic voters and asked them a lot of questions about their beliefs and their priorities and what they want to see their party do. I think it's an interesting poll because I think we ask questions in ways that people that most polls just don't ask people things. And what came across loud and clear is exactly what we've been talking about. They want a party that fights more. They want a party that takes on rich and corporate interests. Things that they said, like we asked people, do you think the Democratic Party is too timid or just about right or too aggressive on a series of things? And of course, they said too timid about a lot of things.
Not all of them, right?
Yeah, nearly all of them. But the ones that really ranked high were taxing the rich, taxing corporations, going after corporate bad actors. They were these bread and butter economic things.
Yeah, we didn't do it in 2008, and we should have.
Yeah.
So you also talk about the lessons we could learn from the Joe Biden years.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really important because you talked about the economic progress he was making wasn't fast enough. But you coupled it with, okay, but seriously, he could have talked about it. He could have explained it. He could have every day said what he was fighting to do and who was trying to stop him. And I had, echoes of FDR through all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Biden and Obama was this way too. Democrats have been this way. Well, many Republicans too. But they regard the presidency as this precious thing that they shouldn't deploy too often. Well, here's one thing and one thing only that I hope the next Democratic president learns from Donald Trump. Be out there nearly every day. Be out there every day talking to the press and talking about your priorities and talking about who's in your way and creating conflict and showing the American people who's blocking you from doing the things you want to do. That's the one thing that Trump does well. Control the daily.
The Democrat in my lifetime who did that, well, not my whole lifetime, but the Democrat that I remember who did that and really did it was Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
And he was great at it.
Yeah.
I mean, the left may not like him, but he was out there. He was articulate. He knew how to pick a fight.
Yeah.
And he knew how to win a fight.
Right. Like during the shutdown and during some of those budget fights.
Yep.
When he said, things like, if you want to cut Social Security, you're going to have another person sitting in this chair.
Yep.
Which they tried to do.
Yep. It is. Yep.
But even he was doing it we're in a different age now. And, we're in the age of social media and of constant news cycles. I really, the next Democratic president just has to emulate Trump and get out there on a daily basis and explain, here's why this monopoly power is bad. Here's why it's taking money out of your pocket. It's picking your pocket, and it's these three particular corporations, and we're going to bring lawsuits against them. And if I have votes in Congress to get them, we're going to get them through votes.
And we do need legislation. I mean, there were barely enough votes to pass the ACA. And so it was passed. It wasn't the best law we could pass. And the Republicans have never offered help making it any better. They just said repeal it. They've never offered help making it better, but we could. All those middlemen that are in there, all the room for profiteering around insurance. We really can make medicine more affordable for Americans. But we need the votes to do it. That has to be legislative. We'll win it.
Yeah. Yeah, it really has to be. And that involves killing the filibuster, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, you talked about some targets for government action. And I'm sort of reaching into them here. But yeah. I mean, list a few, because they're great. Things that I think all Americans would want.
Well, big pharma is an obvious one, and just the healthcare industry in general, the way that a company like United Health Group has just taken ownership of so many different aspects of healthcare provision, from hospitals to physicians' practices and prescription drug offerings and so forth. But pharma, I cite one little thing that pharma has done for many, many years. They pay generic drug makers to hold their cheaper versions of drugs off the market.
Right. Say that again. I want people, if you're just casually listening, pay real attention to this. This is a shocker. Say it again.
Yeah. Big brand name pharmaceutical companies pay generic drug makers to keep their cheaper versions of competitive drugs off the market.
Yeah. It's like catch and kill in journalism.
Yeah. And, it's a long recognized problem. Bush's Justice Department actually tried to do something about it. Justice departments from both parties have tried to do something about it, but you can't do it through antitrust action. It takes too long. It's too slow. They have great lawyers. It gets before some Federalist Society judge who throws it out, and you got to start all over again. It really takes legislation, and the legislation exists. The legislation is in the hoppers in both houses of Congress to end this practice. If it could ever get to the floor, it could pass. But will it ever get to the floor? That's the question. But that's the kind of thing that, I'd like to see Democrats raise awareness of, so people even know this is happening. What percentage of Americans know this is happening? 0.3 of 1%, right?
At most.
At most, yeah. So they've got to mount these public awareness campaigns to make sure people know this. The meat packers are another target. They squeeze cattle ranchers. They raise prices. They control more and more and more of the market. They shouldn't control that much of the market, just 4 big meat packers. Now, this is a problem, again, that nobody's given 5 seconds thought to in their lives. So you have to explain it to people. It takes some education, but they'll get it. They'll understand that. And you'll have small cattle ranchers on your site.
Absolutely. I mean, I think agriculture has been so damaged. Rural America has been so damaged by the policies of, again, it is the Davos Epstein crowd, we rule the world crowd. And that doesn't include a lot of people in rural America, who've been taken for a ride. I think Democrats have to, now here, I think they have to show up and have these fights, but they also have to show up. They have to go back out there and say, look, I'm your neighbor. I live out here. I'm going to fight for us out here.
Yeah.
Because you can't expect anybody to vote for it if you don't ask them for your vote. If you're not out there.
No, and they haven't even been asking for those folks' vote. I'm going to say to you right now that my phone's going to ring in about 2 minutes, and I have to go when that phone rings. And I'm
okay.
Really
I appreciate that.
Thank you for having me on just preemptively.
Yep.
But yeah, Democrats haven't talked enough about farmers, about rural life. They talk a lot about the cost of college and college loans, and those are some very serious problems. They never talk about vocational school. Is there anything, can they talk about that? Let's make vocational school free. 60% of kids don't get college degrees.
No, look, the labor unions do make their training. It doesn't cost. People graduate with no debt and they go into trades. I mean, I love what the trades have done all over the country. Yeah. Hey, in your article, you talked about the Democratic Party rising to the challenge 3 times in its history. I think they're 4. I mean, I think FDR did it twice because the Great Depression was surely one. Civil rights was one, but so was beating fascism.
Beating fascism, yeah. I sort of bracket that in a certain way.
Yeah, I mean, it's good DNA for a political party.
It is, yeah. Fair enough.
If we have those roots and respect to those things that we value, and are willing to do what you've just suggested, which is to say, look, this is the side I'm on. I'm not confused about it. I'm going to fight. Then let's have that fight. All right, I hear your phone.
There's my phone. I'm so sorry.
Everybody, the New Republic.
Thanks.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're heading into our last hour. Second half of that hour is your calls. But before we get to that, I am very lucky to be joined again by Jill Weinbanks. You know Jill. She has championed that very quaint idea called rule of law for her whole career. And, she is an explainer of all this stuff on MSNBC and on podcasts. And she's been on this channel a bunch, I think most recently after the Senate debate that we held. We're lucky for her wisdom and her goodwill. Hi, Jill.
Hi there, and happy Valentine's Day.
Thank you. Happy Valentine's Day to you, too.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, we got a lot to talk about, Jill. I don't even know where you want to start. Did you have any thoughts on Pam Bondi's testimony this week?
I had mostly revulsion. It was a really unprofessional display of prepared aggression, hostility, attack. Totally missed the point of an oversight hearing, which is to answer questions about the conduct of the department that is funded by Congress and which has the right to ask questions about how money is being spent. And instead to have prepared personal attacks on each Democrat. I don't remember which member of Congress said she was Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, but I really felt that was the best description. She was one thing to the Democrats and Miss Sweetheart to all the Republicans. It was really one of the worst displays I've ever seen, and was completely a waste of time and money to have had a hearing where she would not answer any of the relevant questions about what the Department of Justice is doing.
I mean, she managed to insult all of the Epstein victims and the idea of oversight at the same time.
Yes.
It was really
isn't that amazing?
I mean, but what became clear is this administration's view of what Congress is. They think that the legislators are there to be their Rockettes, their dance chorus behind them. They're there to high kick when asked for, and do the can when they're asked to do it. And if they, get out of line and miss a step, she made it clear they'll be surveilled and indicted by the Justice Department.
I think that is exactly correct. And they've gotten away with it is the worst part of it. They've gotten used to Congress being subservient and not standing up for their own rights. I am seeing a few members on the Republican side who are saying enough is enough. And I think we are going to hopefully see more and more of that when we see them standing up to lies being told, to the violence that ICE is imposing and conducting. I'm hoping that there will be Republicans who go, my constituents aren't going to stand for this anymore. We have to stop it, and that they will get involved and will come back to a more normal place where Congress is a co-equal branch with the executives.
Yeah, I agree with the last half of that, Jill. I am past waiting for Republicans to do the right thing. I just want to get to the midterms and kick them out, and let's just do the work. They're not a serious party. They're a fascist party. They're not going to do the work. I mean, some of them will be afraid and will try and switch sides a little bit again as they start to lose everything. But America's made up its mind. We just don't want their stormtroopers in our streets.
Right. And, it's interesting because, of course, Homan has now announced, after replacing Bombino, that they were going to take troops out of the ICE people and Border Patrol out of Minneapolis. Minneapolis, of course, is saying, I'll believe it when I see it. But people are asking, well, why is he doing that? And while I'd love to say it's because they realize it's ineffective, that it's a waste of money, that it's also counterproductive, I don't think that's why they're doing it. They're doing it because their poll numbers are plummeting, and they know that this is one of the reasons, so they're withdrawing. But I think there's another reason, is they are seeing bad court decisions. And so rather than let this particular case go to court and the court to say, you must do the following things and you cannot do the following things, they're coming out so they will be able to say, it's a moot case, dismiss it. We're not there anymore, so there's nothing to resolve. And I'm hoping that the courts will say, yes, there is, because this is something that will replicate if we don't give you clear guidance. And so that maybe there will still be, as the court said, you can't send the National Guard to Chicago or Portland just because you wanna. You cannot do that. And they didn't like that decision, so they, are withdrawing troops. And I think the same thing will be true in terms of using ICE.
That's very smart. That's a very good point. It's so interesting. I mean, we now know they violated at least 97 court orders just in January. And that I read this statistic this morning that there's something like, I want to find it for you, but an enormous number of habeas cases all over the country. And the government's ruled against them something like 4,500 times on these cases.
And only for them on a very teeny, minuscule percentage of times.
Right. And they're and a huge expense. They're having to, bring people back to the U.S. I mean, the contempt stuff in Boasberg's case that's so old is now back, and he's made a ruling that they have to give people due process. Oh my gosh. But the courts are slow, but they are getting the job done. And they're getting more creative in holding the administration accountable for following their rulings.
Yes, and that makes me think of at least two things. One is, and I'm sorry, I can't pronounce the name correctly, but there was a case where two Venezuelan men were followed, attacked, shot at, and the ICE agent said, they attacked us, they assaulted us, and that's why we did that. And the government actually had to go to court and for one of the few times admit that the evidence was quite the contrary, and those two ICE agents are now under investigation, and the court dismissed the assault charges against the two Venezuelan men and did it with prejudice, which means that the government cannot file those charges again. And it was because they lied. They actually lied to the Department of Justice lawyers who misrepresented to the court. The same thing happened. I believe there are lies in the FBI affidavit for the search warrant to take the ballots from Fulton County. And eventually that is going to, the ballots will be returned to Fulton County, and the government will be penalized because they only were recycling long debunked conspiracy theories as establishing probable cause, which it doesn't do. And then, of course, you also have how many grand juries have refused to return indictments that the government is presenting, the most recent being the government tried to indict 6 members of Congress for accurately and honestly telling what the law is and saying you have an obligation not to follow unlawful orders, an obligation to follow lawful orders and to presume that they are lawful, but when you know they're not, it is not your job to follow them. They tried to get an indictment, and the grand jury went, no, we're not doing that. These are members of Congress who have a speech and debate clause protection and a First Amendment right, and they only said what the law actually is. This is not treason. This is not something that is hurting the morale of the military. And I am worried that they're going to try again. The government will try again to get an indictment. And it's hurting the perception of the rule of law in America when they keep doing this. It's wrong. It's just wrong.
It's wrong. I mean, whether it's members of Congress or the name that you were thinking of was Julio Sosa Celis. He's the man who got shot, just like Miramar Martinez was shot here in Chicago before. In both cases, the government said they're terrorists. In both cases, the government said they were a danger, one with a broom, the other with a car. In both cases, the government lied and had to back off. It's a terrible place when the United States government is going into courts in the United States and lying. It's unthinkable.
Yeah. I used to be so proud to go into court as a member of the Department of Justice and say, on behalf of the people of the United States of America, and to know that I had a presumption of regularity, that what I said would be believed, because I was subject to strict rules of honesty. And now we don't have that. And any judge who listens to someone from the Department of Justice now has to say, I wonder if that's true. I wonder if they're telling me the real facts. And when you see a case like this dismissed because the agents lied and said they were being assaulted, and that justified their action. And they weren't assaulted. The video shows that clearly. Look at the Preddy example. They called him a domestic terrorist and said that he was, assaulting them. And he was on the ground. He did not have a weapon. It was in his waistband. They removed it while he was on his stomach. And had no
then they shot him in the back.
And then they shot him 10 times. It's so wrong. It means that every single one of us, he clearly didn't look like an immigrant. He looked like a white American, blonde. And there was no cause for that. He was no threat to them at all. And he was already disabled on the ground, and there were multiple agents around him. That is murder, and they should be tried for murder.
Yeah, same with Renee Good's killer, whose last words were, "I'm not mad at you, dude," and then she tried to drive away.
Yeah, away from anybody in her way, and gets shot and killed. And the last words out of the killer's mouth are, "You bitch." Shows exactly what we're dealing with in this country. And I'm so proud of the people of Minneapolis standing up for their neighbors and doing what they are doing. And they've chased ICE out. I mean, I love the story told by just a Minnesota resident who was interviewed by the press and, talked about ICE out day, which is where the lake freezes and they put old cars on it and they have bets on when the ice is going to melt, and it's called Ice Out Day. And so he was saying, and we know how to deal with ice out.
They sure do.
Yeah.
I am so really proud of this rising spirit across America. That's just not going to put up with this president and his party who've put us in this dark corner. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
I want to ask you about something else. DHS, I think, has sued tech companies to release data on anyone who's used social media to criticize ICE. So Google's been sued. I guess they're giving them my data because I've sure used social media to criticize ICE. But I'm remembering It wasn't that long ago. The Biden administration said, we'd like to meet with tech companies just to share with them the facts about COVID so they don't spread misinformation. And the Republicans roasted them over the coals and said it's censorship. And now they are literally suing to get my information because I've been critical of them.
You know, Edward, that is such a good analogy. I hadn't thought of that contrast, but you are absolutely right. And the obvious privacy rights of everyone who posts on social media to not have the government attacking them. And social media is under attack. There are several lawsuits. Two are currently happening, one in New Mexico, one in California, about the addiction of children
young people
to social media, and the other is about sexploitation of children on social media. And I think the two issues are different, although everyone is conflating the two cases because they're sort of both saying that social media has responsibilities that they're not meeting. But it's going to be interesting. They raise very interesting questions as to whether or not there is a First Amendment right for social media to allow this, whether Section 530 of the 230 of the Communications Act gives them freedom that they cannot be charged with anything that is posted on their sites. They're not responsible for the words of anyone else. And whether the algorithms are what is creating the addiction and allowing the sexploitation. So it's going to be very, very interesting as we enter this modern age where that's how information is communicated.
Yeah, I think we have so much work to do when we take back control of the government in so many different fields.
Yes.
You know, but we have to break the. I mean, Jill, the three conversations that I had before yours today, all centered on whatever the set of issues are, whether it's social media or climate change or grocery prices or ICE agents in our streets. The solution has to involve wresting control from the Davos and Epstein class of people who think they rule over all of us and have led us to such a bad place in so many different areas. I wonder what you think of that.
Well, I think you're right. And it's been interesting. There are a lot of articles. The New York Times had a very powerful one about what the Epstein file shows about who's ruling us and the special accommodations that are available to the rich and wealthy, powerful people. So it does, and that fits with your theory about what's going on here. It's really not a good situation. Everything that's going on with the Epstein files. And of course, yeah, you can cherry pick, oh, isn't it interesting that Mr. So-and-so is in it? And I have to point out that my sisters-in-law are all in the Epstein files. And one of my best friends is in the Epstein files. I unfortunately didn't make it. I don't know what I did wrong. I haven't made the Epstein files, and I never made the Nixon's enemy list. So what am I doing wrong? I mean, gosh, I don't know. But you have to worry if you're traveling abroad and you want to come back into America and they say, I have to see your social media posts. What do you do? I mean, I'm not letting them see mine.
Yeah. Yeah. I have I guess, a question about the U.S. attorneys in the country that I don't understand. So the Northern District of New York was one of those areas where the president illegally put somebody in the job, right? And so after a time, per statute, the judges in that district are the ones who pick the U.S. attorney. And so they said, okay, well, there's this vacancy because it was illegally filled by the administration. Now we have a vacancy, but we need a U.S. attorney. So they appoint somebody, and immediately the person they appoint gets a letter saying, yeah, you're fired from Trump, saying the Constitution says the president appoints them, not the judges. What happens here? How do we figure this out? And I mean, it's important to have a U.S. attorney, but they have to be there legally.
this is a complicated question, and I'm so glad you asked it because it's not getting the attention that it deserves. We've had a number of U.S. attorneys who are not in the position. Lindsay Halligan is maybe the most famous of them, but the U.S.
Alina
attorney
Habba,
in the North,
Lindsay Halligan,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Those, I think probably Habba and Halligan are the two better known. But this one in New York is quite interesting because Blanche then fired him, saying, "We don't want him." Well, it's not his choice. There has to be a U.S. attorney, and it's only by appointment by the members of the court. The federal district court appoints a replacement when no one has been confirmed. Now, all the government has to do is nominate and get confirmed a legitimate candidate, but they can't keep putting in their own choice without Senate confirmation, even though the Senate confirmation is almost guaranteed because the Senate, as we've been talking about, the Senate and the House, have totally caved. They don't stand up for what are their rights. If he wants to spend money, okay, he can spend it. Oh, he doesn't want to spend it, even though we've assigned it? No, he doesn't have to. The power of the purse is Congress's responsibility, not the president's. And we have not only the Constitution saying that, but we have laws that specifically say that. The president is not allowed to impound funds. If the government, if Congress passes a law and says this is what has to be spent, it has to be spent. And so we're in a situation in America where the roles are just not being observed. And this is an interesting one, is, okay, the federal court can appoint another person and Blanche can fire him again. And how does it go to the Supreme Court, and what will the Supreme Court do about it? I mean, this is one where the law is completely clear that the court has the power to do this and that the president does not. It's so clear. I cannot believe as much stretching and pretzel making that the Supreme Court has done already. This is one that may be too much even for them, that they would have to say that you can't fire the person appointed. His term will expire, his or her term will expire when you appoint and get consent from the Senate for the confirmation of a new candidate. That's when you have the power. You can appoint someone as long as it gets Senate confirmation. You haven't done that, so this is how we have a U.S. attorney.
Yeah, but if you're that man, what do you do? Can you show up for work? What? It's very confusing. Very
well,
confusing.
Lindsay Halligan kept coming to work, even though the court had said she was not supposed to.
Right.
And I'm going to have to think about that. You actually have me stumped. I have to say, I hadn't thought about who's going to do, who could bring a lawsuit. I guess, if he got fired just as the acting U.S. attorney, but because he was already in the U.S. attorney's office, as long as he still has his job, if he got fired. But then again, the Supreme Court has sort of said, at least in the interim, that Donald Trump can fire anybody he wants to fire, and they can't come back to work until after the case goes all the way to the Supreme Court, which is, of course, not going to help. I mean, you have top officials from the FTC and the FEC who have been fired and kept out of office. So what do? They have no job. They have to go get a job. And then,
speaking of all that, Jill, speaking of all of that stuff, you've brought up the Supreme Court here, so I got to ask, they've taken oral arguments on birthright citizenship, on tariffs, on firing somebody who works in the Fed. Why are they taking their sweet time? I mean, John Roberts, he can say to people like me, "Oh, you don't understand the intricacies of law," and he's right. So maybe he gets the benefit of the doubt on some of these things, but he gets no benefit of the doubt on timing. Timing is a political question, and I understand it as well as he does, and he's playing politics. What the heck is going to get them to get off their butt and make the decisions that are now, they can't duck any longer?
It's so interesting because appellate courts have ordered judges to act, or else they will mandamus the judge They will force the judge to make a decision. This is in Florida about whether or not the documents case proceeds in some way, whether the report, the Jack Smith report, can be
the light of
released or
day.
not.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
exactly. So, I mean, courts do have that power, but who has the power? I mean, the government isn't going to appeal their own firing. The person fired probably doesn't have a case, but maybe that person does. I mean, others who have been fired have brought suits, but they have lost. They've mostly been told, and now he's passing. In fact, I believe it came into effect already. He passed a new rule that basically eliminates civil service protections.
I
when
saw
you're
it.
a civil
the Schedule
servant,
F rule. Yep.
right? Now all of a sudden, no, if I think you have anything to do with anything, I can fire you at will, and you have no rights to appeal. No more civil service protections. Civil servants get paid less than they would in the private sector. They deserve to have at least some modicum of protection against a lunatic Republican president just willy-nilly firing them because he wants to bring in more loyal patriots. And, they've had to, for example, they've lost so many people in the Minneapolis U.S. Attorney's Office. They've had to bring in judge advocate general lawyers, military lawyers, to bring cases, immigration cases, and to act as immigration judges. These are not people. I have a very high regard for JAG officers. I supervise JAG as General Counsel of the Army, and they are smart, talented, dedicated, but they aren't trained to do immigration law. They aren't trained to be immigration judges, and they're suddenly being pulled from their duty, which means they're not doing the work for the military that is necessary, and is being placed in these positions because they can't keep enough people. And one of them got fired because he ruled, a JAG lawyer who was acting as a judge, an immigration judge, ruled in favor of asylum, and he got fired for doing that. So where are we? This is 1939 in Germany, and it's up to all of us to stand up, or there will be no one there when they come for us. And so I'm going to keep on, despite the risk. I will keep on putting anything in my social media that I think has consequences for the rule of law, for my neighbors, for immigrants who deserve to be here. We have to do that. And, I hope that there are some consequences for the killings, for the shootings. People who didn't deserve it are being attacked, and we just shouldn't be allowing it.
Well, Jill, that's going to be the end of our conversation today. I think it's a good place to end with you continuing to do the good work you do, no matter what these guys bring.
I will not give up. I encourage everyone listening on that last point about this feeling like concentration camps. There's also been a lot of reporting on the warehouses being bought to house tens of thousands of immigrants without any bail being possible, just keeping them housed there until they can be deported, even if there's no case against them. And I just feel like we need to be protecting everybody in this country. And I hope people will get out the vote. Here in Illinois, it's only about a month away before our primary. Get out and vote. Every single race matters, whether it's judges, whether it's the school board.
Vote today. Vote tomorrow.
Yep.
I mean, early voting has begun in Illinois. So if you're in Illinois, go vote. Yeah.
Exactly.
Thank you, Jill. Always great.
Thank
Always
you, Edwin.
great to talk.
It's been a pleasure. Bye.
Bye. All right, everybody, we're taking a quick break in your calls when we come back.
Welcome back to Edwin Eisendrath's It's the Democracy, Stupid on WCPT 820.
773-763-9278. 773-763-9278. I've got Jim and Al and Steve and Ron and Dave already queued up. So call in if you want to get your chance, starting with Jim. Let's go.
Hi, Edwin. The Republican House passed the Show Your Papers law this week, but I wish they would have went farther. They should have went to the DNA test with a Musk satellite somewhere in the sky, and they could just send the DNA results, whether you were living or dead. Apparently, you're alive if they can do the DNA test on you. Or maybe they could do it while you're dead. I don't know. But anyway, it goes to the satellite, and then Musk will decide whether or not you're eligible to vote. Now, they've got Olson, the guy who ran around in 2020, whatever that maniac, he's in charge of the voting for Trump. He was with the Kraken woman, with Steve Bannon and the other nut, Flynn. You know, what these guys are after, God only knows. But they do have a nation of whole. If none of this works, they've got Maduro, and he can testify that him and Bad Bunny, they were the ones that fixed the 2020 election. And Maduro will say it because they believe that he had the ability to do it. And that's why, who was it, Tulsi Gabbard? Who was the nut that went down to Georgia to get the votes? I can't keep track of it.
Yeah, she did.
Yeah. But she went to Puerto Rico also. And this is the connection between Bad Bunny and Maduro. And Maduro probably told him, his lawyer in jail, that he could provide some of the evidence if they went to Puerto Rico, because that was really from left field. What is Tulsi Gabbard, the CIA agent, going to Puerto Rico to check out? There wasn't that many votes. But apparently this is a feeler from Maduro to try to get a pardon. But, they'll pull out all the stops to try to win this thing. But what's fascinating to me is, and also Rubio wants to be the prime minister of Cuba. What's interesting to me is, why do they really think in their heart of hearts that this is a good strategy to try to outlast all the 81 million people who voted for Biden, and try to outlast all of us? I'm serious. What do you think, Edwin?
I think they're insane. I think they want to. They want to tell us it's all that elections don't matter because it's all rigged. They want to say democracy doesn't matter because it's all rigged, and then they want to rig everything and have all the power. And by the way, they want all. I told you this. Donald Trump thinks it's all his. Mine. All the money, all the laws, everything is mine. And you know what? Americans everywhere are saying, no, sir. No, sir. With respect, sir, go jump in Lake Michigan in December.
Right, exactly. But let's say they put him on Mount Rushmore and they could twist history, like they're getting rid of history left and right. But is money? How? My point is their progeny going to keep stealing money? Is this the idea to keep gouging more and more money?
Yes. The son is now a major defense contractor. They've opened up their crypto accounts and they're getting tons of foreign money. Yeah. Jared has been named, in documents now. Supposedly, as the whistleblower has gone after him for illegal representation of foreign governments. All of it's corrupt. And
And then the son wants a nuclear power plant. I think this might have been on the motive for breaking down the environmental laws, because his son wants to put a $6.5 billion power plant up, probably to these AI places. Need all this extra energy, so they're going to need a couple of those. But I'm sure there'll be no environmental restrictions on any of those people. But these people are insane. Anyway, Edwin, have a good week. I'm very confident, though. I'm extremely confident that we'll turn this around, because this is America. America's got too deep of a history to be taken by these whatever you want to call these people. Thank you.
Nothing I can say on the radio. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. All right, Al.
Hi, Edwin.
Hello,
good afternoon. I just was going to say that I certainly agree with what you have been saying about the ruling class, or the Epstein class, that are controlling everything right now. And those are the people we have to be paying attention to because of how much money they are throwing around in our media. And that class includes Vladimir Putin and how he's been affecting our social media and our government. You should have heard the
very good
last
point, Al.
hour with Phil. What's that?
It's a very, very good point.
Yeah. You should have heard the last hour with Phil Ittner on there talking about what Russia's been doing. You know, they've been at war with us forever, but and what we have to do is we have to be finding ways to throw sand in the gears. And there are ways to do it. And, you know, I heard a new word the other day called the attention economy. And we have
very
to,
important.
we have to take over the attention economy and figure that out. And so we all got to be thinking about what we can all do to throw sand in those gears, and be talking about what our community can be doing as well, and what ideas we have to get through this, because we got a lot of smart people, a lot of empathetic people here, so we just got to use that as much as we possibly can. You know,
Absolutely right. I mean, this community here around the people who listen to this show and are part of my online stuff that I do every week with It's Democracy Stupid and all of the other shows here on WCPT. We've created a community of people who are sharing the facts out, who are talking to their neighbors, who are doing stuff. And this is the stuff that's making a difference. And over time, you know, you see all over America similar efforts and people showing up and turning out and raising their hand and saying, not in my backyard, and no, we don't treat people like this, and you guys can't get away with it anymore. And I think we are going to sweep them all away. But we have to work hard. I'm not saying we can rest. They're going to cause a lot of damage between here and getting thrown out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One more point, just one of the ways that I think we're lacking right now is in our technical community, and our technical community doing more collaboration to figure out how to throw sand in the gears. And that's one of the things that I'm big on. And doing that right now, and there's so many opportunities, and I could say more, but I guess I'll stop with that right now.
Well, I thank you, Al. I really appreciate it. Hang in there.
Yeah, that's what we're trying to do. I mean,
thanks. Stay strong. Yep. All right, Steve, you're next.
Hello, Edwin. Yeah, I got three things for you. First off, I really cringe when everybody refers to these Epstein class people as elites. They're anything but elite. They're craven. They're greedy. They are seamy. So anyway, I just thought I'd put that out there. They're anything but elite in my point of view.
Fair. It's hard to know the language. Nobody's saying elite is a compliment.
Got it. Anyway, secondly, based on what Mr. Nellis was talking about, I believe that, or the guest you had before them, I think what we need to have a New Deal redux. I mean, let's just go for it. Let's a progressive agenda of go for it. Let's invoke the spirit of FDR and just go for everything and go for it on steroids. Go FDR on steroids. New Deal on steroids, and go for it, because that's what I think. That's what's going to take to.
You know what?
Stamp out.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with you. Yeah. And we have to do what FDR did. FDR dealt with the Great Depression first, and then fighting fascism. Mm-hmm. Here we have to do both of them at the same time.
Exactly. One more thing, real quick, and I'll get off. You know what? This thing with the Bad Bunny concert and the halftime show, this may be what I think is happening. We're seeing the last gasp of white supremacy, white national. This might be the last gasp. That funky 2-bit halftime show might be the last gasp of that kind of white racist, Christian nonsense. phony Christian nonsense. This could be the last gasp, and we've crushed them. We have to crush them in the midterms, and I think we could really turn this thing around, personally. But anyway,
I
that's just
appreciate
me.
that. I hope
talking.
you're right, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you, Steve.
All right.
All right, Ron, you're next.
Hello, Edwin. Edwin, this report came out of New York Times, not the print edition, but the online edition, that Epstein was named in involvement with drug running, in particular the Iran-Contra. And also that information came out on the Charlie Kirk show, where they covered it for like a whole half hour. And the way I remember it, I can't remember if there were Mossad agents who were involved with the drug running or gun running that Epstein was involved with. But he supposedly collected between 5 and 10% on each deal. Now, if we go back to the Iran-Contra, of course, that was under Reagan. That was guns for cocaine, where there was so much cocaine coming into the United States, the CIA had to invent crack cocaine, which started a whole other epidemic in this country. But that's an avenue for Epstein that we should be seriously concerned with. How long was he trafficking in drugs and guns? Was it any involvement in the fentanyl operation? And of course, we know all of his, many of his associates were bankers and financiers, and that would do well in finding avenues to launder drug money and gun running money. So that's another aspect we should really delve into and hammer home, because that's one of the things that supposedly the fascists under Trump are opposed to, is drugs. Of course, it's not when their people are pushing them, but it's something that we should definitely concentrate on, in my opinion.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you, Ron. Hang in there. Dave, you're next.
Hey, Edwin. Yeah, I have two things here. First one was last week. I couldn't get through, but are you aware that Keg's Breath and they put those two National Guard troops who got shot and killed in D.C., they're going to put them up for the Purple Heart, which is reserved normally for troops who are wounded or killed by enemy action almost exclusively in combat areas abroad. And that Hegseth, they call that Lackenwell. That was the guy that Afghani guy that shot them. They called him a radical. It was part of the reason for the awarding the Purple Hearts. And then prosecutors specifically described attacks as an ambush on National Guard members. Well, that's like, if you remember back 12, 13 years ago when they gave those ones at Fort Hood Purple Hearts, and that was a fratricide case. I'm sorry, what his beliefs were in that, but he was still an American major. And second one here was yesterday. Trump, for the first time publicly, told the nature of that attack, that the injury suffered by those U.S. personnel in that daring raid to seize Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro and his wife from Caracas home, and that absolute resolve, which involved more than 200 forces and 150 aircraft, left American helicopter pilots wounded pretty bad in the legs. Trump said one of the soldiers who helped capture Maduro will receive the Medal of Honor. Of course, Trump didn't ID a service member as of December 2025. Trump had they've changed the law, the rule that the living Medal of Honor recipients will now receive around $67,500 on annual honorariums under a new law signed by him. And they already in the past they used to get like about $1,400 a month or so, but now it's going to be a nice, big payday for some of them.
He loves giving away money. Look, there's nothing correct about what happened in Venezuela, but our troops are trained well. They do their job, and I honor them. It's not their fault when they're directed to do criminal things. I don't want any National Guard people shot in Washington or anywhere else, but I want them off our streets.
But that was in foreign soil. I'm sorry, you know.
Yeah, I agree.
And
Well, as always, Dave, thanks very much. I really appreciate your continued calls and your attention to all this stuff. I learn something every time you call. Thank you. Greg, you're next.
Yeah, hi, Edwin. Thanks for taking the call. My first point is, like the old saw, follow the money. I say follow Bill Barr. He's been in the thick of this whole thing with Epstein and some of these other things people have alluded to about the arms for hostages or those type of things. He's been in the thick of it. Epstein, everything. His old man got Epstein the job, and Bill Barr, follow Bill Barr. He's an obstructionist with lots of things that happen. He's taking things. He's obscuring things. The last thing I wanted to ask you about is if you've ever heard anything about Burke County, Florida, in the 2024 election.
I have not. What have I missed?
Well, I sent a link to the text line. If you have time, I'd really encourage that you read it. It's from a guy who has a Substack called This Will Hold Substack. And the title is, How Did 6 Million People Vote in Burke County, Florida? And he goes through it, and it's very interesting because it also ties in a lot of this stuff with Eaton Technologies and Musk and so forth, and the going in and working on the, secretly using their capabilities on the totalizers after the election, flipping votes. It's conspiratorial, I know, but I think it to me, it's worth your time if you got. It'd probably take about 20 minutes to watch it, but it's a video by this guy, and he discusses all this. Burke County, Florida. It doesn't exist in the real world, but it was on the TV screen that night during the coverage of the 2024 election returns.
All right, I got it up in front of me on my screen. I'll read it when the show's over. I appreciate that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah,
you bet.
Have a good weekend. Bye-bye.
You too. Where are we? Brian.
Hey, good afternoon.
Hello. Hi, Brian.
A lot of good
Thank you for calling. Are you calling from New Mexico?
Yes, I am. I'm out walking my dog.
Okay, well, that's always good. Thank you for joining us.
Good. I like to take the 30,000-foot view of where we're at politically, and I think a problem the Democrats have is a lot of their policies, they don't fit together. For example, like we have a shortage of affordable housing. A lot of people are expecting AI to create a lot of unemployment. But yet the Democrats can't seem to figure out how mass immigration negatively affects both those issues. It's like the Democrats need to realize immigration has to be controlled at a sane level. And we can't, what's gone on for the last 20 years cannot happen again. Nobody wants that. And the lax attitude and the position where we just let people overstay their visas and, oh, that's no big deal. They can stay. Not a problem. I think that's over.
No, Brian, let me just, you said nobody wants that. And I agree with that statement. And there are no Democrats who want it. I mean, the Democrats, Joe Biden belatedly decided to get tough on immigration late in his term after overreacting the wrong way at the beginning. Obama deported more people who were here in violation of the law.
I've heard all these points, and it's true.
Yeah.
But
so Democrats, I just want you to say, like, Democrats are not in favor of an open border. They're in favor of a controlled border, but we're also in favor of the rule of law. Okay, I mean, if somebody's here legally and wants asylum, let's let enough asylum judges to judge the case quickly and say they can either legally be here or send them away, right? And if and it certainly shouldn't be sneaking over the border unaccounted for. Although I think we're able to get control of that. We do need more money on things like fentanyl detectors in the border. All of that stuff was in the bill that got bipartisan bill that got negotiated at the end of Biden's term and got killed. But I just don't want to let it go that Democrats are are somehow in favor of an open border anymore, or ever really were. But the border was too open for a while. Nobody thinks it should be open anymore. Not a single Democrat's going to be in favor of that.
You know, another example, you were talking about the meatpacking industry with your friend from the New Republic. Well, they're one of the worst exploiters of illegal immigrants. And that whole subject is just glossed over. Like, oh, well, it's
no. I agree with you. I mean, these immigrants are coming here for work, and they're not working for me. You know, they're working for big corporations, no question. Most of it. But look, America needs a real immigration policy. We'll have a conversation about what's the number of people that we want to take in from the rest of the world. How do we want to go about doing that in a way that is fair and controllable, right? And how do we deal with the ones who come here extra legally? And how do we adjudicate their cases and send them away? We have the means for doing it, but surely that does not mean that we throw away the law book and arrest. I mean, they arrest 4,000 people in order to get 31 who are here illegally and have committed violent crimes. And of the 4,000 people they arrest, some of them are American citizens, a lot of them are here legally. You know, you can't just throw away due process to solve this problem. That's where Democrats, I think, will be very firm. We have the power. We're a big, powerful country. We have a strong system of law. We can do this legally.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, well, Brian, thank you. What kind of dog do you have? I'm sorry, I'm losing you. Can you say that again?
They're terriers.
Terriers. Good dogs.
Terriers.
I've got a kind of bloodhound lab. Yeah. All right. Well, enjoy your walk, and thank you for calling in. I appreciate it.
All right. Take care.
All right. We're going to turn to Eileen.
Yes.
Hello,
hi.
Eileen.
I've never spoken with you before. It's Edwin. Is that correct?
Well, thank you for calling in, and it's nice to meet you.
Yeah. Same here. I've been able to speak with Joan Esposito once, I believe, there is a lot to focus in on, but I'm just going to take one broad point. I have become a relatively involved person in politics. Well, I hate to say it, Trump brought me in. But not liking what he was doing brought me into it. But it seems to be one really large problem we have is still people who bury their heads in the sand and pretend like everything is the same. And I mean, I go through it every day where I'm reading and doing what I can, and it seems insurmountable, the damage he's done. But then I'm really angry at the fact, say, in the 2024 election, that I don't remember, you may know the number of how many people who were registered to vote that did not vote. And it angers me. How can you be American and not? And I actually know those individuals, a few of them that don't. They're not bad people, but why they don't feel they have to participate. I don't know how to get the word out, you know?
Well, one way to do it is exactly what you just did. Participate in these public discussions on the radio, online, at the grocery store. I mean, it used to be we said, oh well, polite conversation doesn't include politics, and that we're past that. Americans have to talk to each other about the reality we're in. And you know what? If there's nothing polite about sending stormtroopers onto my street, I'm going to talk about it, and I'm going to text about it, even if Kristi Noem is subpoenaing information about my social media habits. And you're doing the right thing, Eileen. You're doing exactly the right thing.
What about attaching it to your driver's license? Something where, like, when you renew it or whatever, but see, I guess you don't have to do it in person. When you renew it, you have to vote. I mean, your driver's license gives you the permission, and then you have to. It's part of your responsibility as a citizen.
We've never had said voting as a requirement. It's always been considered a right, and a right that many of us take as a sacred one. But it's very hard in our country to force people to do anything, and I think that I think I'm comfortable with that. I want people to want to vote. I want people to understand how important. In the last election, I went out and talked to some homeless guys who were camped not far from my house. So I saw them often, but I went and said to them, "Are you guys going to vote? Are you registered to vote?" And they're like, "Why?" I said, "Well, you know what? It's going to matter more to you than it's going to matter to me what this government's going to do." And they thought about that, and one of them voted. So, registered and voted, which was not easy because we had to get him an address. But he legitimately registered and voted. It's a beautiful thing when people understand the power they have. Yeah.
And I mean, you talk about being forced. I mean, there are people, I'm fortunate enough not to be one of those people hiding out, but there are people that are so terrified of getting picked up at ICE that they're buried in their homes and they don't come out. And I know I can't really even put myself in the place, but I've been helping my daughter to create getting food to communities of immigrants of people that are afraid.
Oh, bravo! Bravo!
And
that's wonderful.
And it feels great. And on the other hand, the question is sort of like people saying, "When will this end?" When will this end? Kind of thing. And
listen, speaking of end, my show is about to end. So I want to thank you for your call. And I'm glad you called in. First time caller. That's great. Listen, everybody, good show. I really appreciate your spending time with me every Saturday. And I appreciate your courage and your determination and your spirit. And this is just the stuff we need to clean these dark and dangerous corners of that our country has been put in by this terrible, awful, hideous man and his enablers. We're going to get through this. We will clean house. We will change the balance of power so that ordinary people can get some of the benefits of this great nation again. And I know that because I know you. Thank you. Talk to you next week.